Thank you for tuning into the SeaBros Fishing Podcast. On this episode, we sit down again with our deckhand, Ben Makaroff, and our father, old Greg, to review our 2024 charter fishing season on the Mass Bay Guides boats. Our 2024 season was action-packed. We ran over 250 trips on our boats, experienced many amazing days of fishing, and had some incredible guests aboard. The main focus of this conversation was to review our logbook from this past season and discuss what we experienced in our local waters throughout Massachusetts. We talk about everything from light tackle shad fishing in the spring months to striped bass fishing in early summer, and we share what we experienced during our tuna season, which takes up the majority of our charter fishing year. Old Greg ensures there's plenty of filterless humor sprinkled throughout our discussion. I know that was a request of many to get him back on, so hopefully you share a few laughs with us. We had a lot of fun on this one. We're officially in winter mode, starting tuna tail commissions. We'll be doing a few other off-season projects, and in terms of the podcast, we'll be pushing out bi-weekly content as we start season 6, so stay tuned. Thank you all of our listeners for the continued support. As always, if you have any questions, topic ideas, or recommended guests for future conversations, please reach out to us on our social media platforms on Instagram, Patreon, and Facebook. And don't forget, the video version of this podcast is also available on our YouTube channel. Without further ado, please welcome to the podcast the Mass Bay Guides crew. Welcome to the SeaBros Fishing Podcast, where we follow 3 words of wisdom. You can't catch them if you don't have a hook in the water. Always trust your instincts. And the last, you'll just have to keep listening. Stay tight.
Hook around. Yep, that's the one. That's the real one. Get up there, man. All right, get back down low. All right, that real good. We doubled up. We doubled up. Woo! All right. Am I coming off or what? Get that down. Don't get on that rock.
Well, first off, let's try not to interrupt each other too bad because we all have serious ADD.
Yep.
What?
Huh? Who?
So
So what are you talking about?
I think it's
mandatory to have ADD.
Yeah.
to
You
catch
gotta talk
tunas.
at the same time. We should both talk at the same time.
Everybody should talk
together.
Let's all just talk right now.
Are you enjoying the show?
I'm going to tell you a story about something completely different while you guys are talking about something else.
So last year we started off this talk about shad fishing.
yeah, but I feel like we can go quick on that.
I mean, you caught
I
a lot of
dominated.
shad. Brian dominated.
End of
He
story.
caught how many shad? 9 shad?
8.
8 shad.
I
I
think
caught, I think 4 shad.
Actually, I have it written down. Shad tally 8 caught.
I had a hole in my waders. So I therefore never partake.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm too old and it's too cold, so I don't go.
You did come for emotional support 2 years ago. Yeah. He showed up for the tailgate.
Yeah.
The pre-fishing
Emotional
tailgate.
support. That was like a running joke this
I
year.
used to fish for shad a lot when I was younger.
I will say, your spot, I think, is now our new favorite spot.
It is the spot.
It's the
I think
spot.
we hooked the most there
Been
overall.
25 years and I knew like that corner always was. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like getting our spot on Middle Bank. You'd have to leave at 12:30 in the afternoon and go stand there until it happened, because otherwise a bunch of people would try to get it, you know?
There were a couple more regulars this year. There was this one. What was that one kid? Was his name Chris?
Regular what? Oh, shad? Yeah, Chris.
There was one other kid that was there as much as we were there, and he did well. He had like at least a bite a night.
He was a chartreuse guy, wasn't he?
Yeah. All chartreuse, the smallest shad dart they make.
Which I still haven't caught one on chartreuse yet.
Pritch has.
I don't know that the color matters. I think you just need to put it in front of them.
I
You need to
agree.
run it over. I mean, like maybe if you're talking hooking them in the mouth, but that's like 15% of the catches are in the mouth. Most of them, like you get them near their face, maybe in that top dorsal fin. I would say 90% of my shad catches over.
encounters.
Yeah, they're caught in that top dorsal fin. You're just running over their back.
Yeah.
Brian's
I mean-
a spoon guy now.
Yeah, well, you did pretty well that first year on them.
Telling you, when you start using my secret rig, you'll be like, yep.
We don't want to say that on the podcast. It's illegal in 50 states.
I will say I did want to try. I have like a hickory shad rig, which it looks pretty cool. It has a little like keel weight, or it's almost like an inline sinker with a dropper rig. And then it's almost like a Carolina rig for bass fishing, but it has a spoon and a little weight, and it just drags along like that. So
your hook's off the bottom, no hook on the bottom.
That's kind of how we used to fish for him at Damon's Point. It's like a dropper, but no hook on the bottom with a weight.
Yep.
And just a dropper loop up a couple feet. And we used to use these like deceiver-looking flies, like the same teasers we use for cod fishing.
Yeah.
And white was always the best. But I don't know if that run still happens. We used to, right off of the railroad bridge at Damon's Point.
Was it hickory shad?
Hickory shad, yeah.
The most memorable catch was my first one landed. That one jumped so many.
Yeah, that was insane.
In case anyone doesn't know what we're talking about with the shad fishing, it's American shad, runs up a lot of rivers in the Northeast and as far down as like Jersey, and I'm pretty sure you can get them even further south, but maybe not. And they're pound for pound on light tackle, like one of the craziest fish you'll ever catch. You hook them up, they just fly around jumping. It's usually in shallow water, so they're in rocks and trees. It's night fishing, and it's fun. It's exciting. I mean, it's not catching 1,000-pound tuna, but it's fun.
It's a fish of 200 casts.
There's a lot of guys that catch them in the day, though, down like in Connecticut.
Yeah. They used to here. Billy Smith used to.
Oh, Billy. No, I don't know who that is.
I remember Billy Smith.
Oh,
yeah, the tackle shop.
Remember
yeah,
the
yeah,
tackle.
Yeah.
But he used to do charters. He had like a river kind of rowboat thing.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of pools between like 53 and where you guys are fishing now.
Yeah.
And he used to just fish in those pools all the time. And then he'd even go down as far as where the store used to be there. You remember where it was when it was right on the river?
Yep.
And he always did well, There used to be this old guy that used to go to the parking lot just about every night and want roe. And he would make these like pancake roe, shad roe things on a grill in the parking lot and like give them out to everybody. And it really wasn't bad, but kind of bizarre.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
I'm all set with shad.
Yeah, I'm good with shad.
He mixed it with like pancake
Speaking
mix.
of eating shad, right? So apparently, I think it was George Washington in the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War when they held up at Valley Forge.
Mm-hmm.
They actually, that river that they're crossing and he's in the boat and everything, they had caught, how they survived the winter there was mostly on shad.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I heard that recently somewhere. And
Some people call those like freshwater minnow shad too, though. I don't know.
Hey, buddy. Hey, Riley.
Probably would have been friggin' yummy eating those. Oh, I got a dozen shad.
oh, yeah.
So shad was fun.
Yeah.
We had much better conditions this year. Not as much rain, so we were able to fish more.
We had one period of bad rain, right?
Short little window, but
Yeah.
last year it hit at prime time and it was completely unfishable.
Right.
And then we morphed into bass right at the tail end of shad season. Our last shad day was the 7th of May. And then our first bass day, which was not a charter, was Dad and I took the little boat up to our little honey hole there.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't a charter, though. That was
No.
just me and you.
We were catching them on artificials. And then George, Claire, and I had that one really sick day.
When you guys
The
filmed
next
the drone.
day, the 13th, when George flew the drone, they had the herring all pinned in that creek in that same spot. It was ferocious.
Right where my boat was.
Right where your boat was supposed to be.
Yeah, I forgot about
Was that big sneaker boat still on the corner there? The one with the diving platform this year?
No, not this year.
Not this year?
Yeah, that Azimuth or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
No, he took out of there. I don't know where he went.
But it was river fishing was good. It wasn't like it was steady for charters, limit wise and action wise, but we didn't see those like slobs that we had for like a week straight last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, we had a few days that was pretty good. It was pretty, saved a lot of charters when we went searching for like those ocean fish.
Struggled.
Couldn't find them, and we'd go back and slam them there, so it was very consistent. There was some days when those big fish were in there when we'd limit out on our 28-inch fish and however long it took. Yeah. But I thought it was pretty good.
I think the herring, like the early herring bite was shorter.
Yep. Yeah, it started off like gangbusters again.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't bad. It just wasn't overwhelming like that I would say over 34, 35-inch class fish, like a commercial class fish, just wasn't in the river in force this year. Like last year, we had those multiple weeks where you would consider trying to get a commercial limit in the North River.
Yeah.
And we had pretty solid 28 to, slot size
34s, maybe.
Yeah, just over slots.
A couple big ones.
Hubbard's was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the South River.
Yeah, we didn't fish that much 2 years, 3 years prior, and this year you basically started us there on the incoming tide.
We also did. You were speaking about how we didn't have as much rain in the spring, but right after shad season, we did have a lot of spring. Remember, we had a bunch of days bass fishing where we were looking for that clean water line, and you'd find like there was all that brackish outflow. And as soon as you get into that brown water, it was like the fishing died and the temperature changed. And we had a few weeks where I know we were like pretty dialed on, I forget specifically.
I think it was 60 degrees.
Yeah. And we'd follow that temperature line right up the river. And as the tide was changing, like that's where the bite ended up being. And like you get too far away from that temperature. And that was the story of the year, the spring, west winds blowing the warm water out. So like it was a fine line between like finding that brackish, ocean water line and staying in the best, biomass of fish in the river. And it would follow that right up and down. And, at certain times, that water would kind of hold up in certain areas, and we found that. But yeah, that was a big thing. Sticking in that right water temperature in the spring and staying out of that super brown, brackish, outflow, tributary fresh water.
I think temperature has a lot to do with every fishing. Matter of fact, I watched the crab show there, and the guy was putting thermometers on some of the traps.
Yep.
And then he narrowed it down to like, okay, this is whatever temperature it was he was going for, and started dumping the traps there and was friggin' slamming them after that. So I mean, even crabs go with temperature, and sometimes we know, everybody here knows that you're going out to the back. We're not looking at temperature differences like the canyons.
Yeah.
We're looking at half-degree temperatures that make a difference.
Especially early season.
Yeah, and I think it's the bait related. Like the bait has more trouble going up and down with their body temperature, so they tend to stay in those comfortable temperatures for them, and then the fish do the same, but
Speaking of bait and bass fishing, the inshore bait was much better this year compared to last year. Mm-hmm. Which made
I didn't think so.
I thought it was better than last year.
It was
for sure better than
definitely
last year.
better
I had to
than
go
2
past
years
the jetty to get bait this year.
We got it. We got it.
Last year we struggled for a while to get bait.
Yeah, there was a little stretch, but in the beginning of the year, we were just like
Very
drive
early
to
in
where
the
we
year
were
was
going and catch
easy.
our bait in 10 minutes. And
Yeah, I feel like May was good last year. 2 seasons ago was good in May. Remember we got all those
herring,
those sea herring and all that
good
stuff.
sized mackerel,
Right. And then
bass sized
it
mackerel.
was struggle fest in June. This year, like we could always rely on going to Stone Ledge too. It was like
Right.
an extra 3-4 miles, but
it was bailing
you would
them in
just
the boat.
smoke them.
Yeah. Like we did a handful of trips early season where, like right off the jetty wasn't great, or right out at the, approach buoys wasn't great for mackerel. But you go 2-3 miles out to that first 100-foot drop, maybe not even Stone Ledge or some of those, but those inner ledges. And before first light, as soon as the light cracks, you load both live wells on the big boat and we head back in, and then you have a bass trip, a half hour of bait fishing, and you have enough.
Tar poach was good for
Tar poach
was
good.
steady. Stone Ledge was stupid.
Yeah,
Easy
it was.
bait.
But it was like, if you have
You had
to
to go
go
6
there.
Yeah, if you
miles
had
to
to
get there.
Yeah.
I have to say,
I've had years where we drove all the way out to the bank to get our bass for bass
I remember
fishing.
those
I hope
days.
that doesn't happen.
That was horrible.
Yeah, you'd have to prep. It was good because they were eating dead baits.
But you smoked everybody when you came back.
Sometimes, we had some periods this year, you couldn't get one to eat a dead bait, and vice versa. You couldn't get one to eat a live bait some days.
Yeah.
It was very weird. You go back and forth, trip to trip, and you'd be like, oh, they're only eating live stuff, and you're trying everything to get them to eat a chunk or a dead mackerel. And they wouldn't touch it.
Weirdest thing in the river, you commented before about how the big herring biomass in the river, it didn't really seem to go crazy like it had in other years. This year, I feel like, the last few years you come in, you have a few herring in the well. They might be dead, they might be alive. And you're fishing your whole trip, and then you want to get that one big kicker fish to get the group happy, and you throw that herring out and drift it way out behind everything. You pick off that one big fish. This year it was pretty seldom, at least in the North River, that the fish even wanted to touch herring.
Yeah,
I feel like
weird.
it was almost like they're like, ew, gross herring, not into it at all.
Or they'd spit it out almost. They grab it, and you're like, they're not there.
Yep.
Tuna weren't really herring eaters this year either.
Early.
Half the year.
30 days ish.
When they were.
They were.
But then once they decided they weren't, there was nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, that's too far ahead.
We're almost there.
Okay.
What other bass things? What other early season bass things? Bait fishing inshore is pretty good. Bass fishing was good.
Back to the temperature thing, I thought it was kind of weird I can think of many trips that we struggled certain tides in certain areas. You couldn't even get a small, you couldn't even get a little one. You couldn't even get a short. And
we struggled
chumming
for
like crazy.
Some days.
Yeah.
And then you'd make a shift and you kind of get into them, but it seemed like it was kind of
me and OG
on or
had a day.
completely off.
Remember that 4-hour kids trip, or maybe it was a 6-hour we had, and we started off, we got some bait and stuff, and we tried trolling around out front a bit, and then we came in the river, and we're like, all right, we got to make something happen here, and the water was 46 degrees, and we're like, uh-oh, and we're like, the tide's right, it should work here. We tried the rock, we tried down by Hubbard's, then we went up in by the sod banks and stuff, and I don't think we might have got a couple bites, but I don't think we landed a bass.
Yeah.
That was a hard.
Then we got bluefish or something.
We got
back, right?
bluefish trolling at the end, but yeah, we couldn't. But specifically, I remember the water temperature was really cold.
It was a big factor.
One of the funniest bass fishing days was we had Mike training. His first time bass fishing.
Mike was a part-time mate for us this year. Mike Doherty.
This was
God,
his
you just straight up threw his name out there.
first time training bass fishing.
Hold on.
G-crimp?
George, get rid of his name.
No.
We'll refer to him as
He thinks
G-crimp.
it's funny.
G unit.
Because it set him up for the whole year.
Yeah.
So we had a group of customers that we have all the time, and they're funny, nice guys and stuff. And
Ball busters.
yeah, and it was slow. So we hadn't caught any keepers. It was halfway through the day, and finally we get a keeper. And Mike actually had dropped a couple, potentially, so we were kind of on his butt a little bit over that. And then we finally got a nice 30-incher or whatever.
Actually, no. It was 28 and a quarter.
Yeah, whatever it was.
Because I remember he measured it, and he's like, oh, yeah, that's a keeper.
Yeah.
It was just...
So then one of the customers...
in his brain, he was like,
one of
I'd
our,
throw it back.
the biggest ball busters. Right. He's like, oh, take my picture with it. Because he didn't want any pictures with little ones. So he getting his picture, and he hands the fish back to Mike, and Mike takes the fish and then throws it over the side again. And I look at him and I go, did you just throw our first keeper back overboard? Right? And then Darren started getting all over his case too. So the whole rest of the day, they were all over him. It lived with him all summer. So like every time he did something wrong, he'd get a grade of a D, and then he'd do something good, he'd be back up to an A. It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Became the company joke.
He did good though.
But I did the same thing one time. Like, it was back when we could keep real big ones, and I gaffed this 50-something incher, and guy's all excited. He's taking his picture, and he hands it back to me, and I go to throw it. Remember how the totes on Big Fish used to be like right behind the salon?
Yeah.
And I go to throw it in the tote, and it like bounces, hits it, and freaking flips over the side, and freaking the guy looks at me and goes, "That was the biggest fish I ever caught." And I'm like, "We'll catch another one," you know. And then I remembered I gaffed it when I put it in, so it wasn't very good.
I don't think I've thrown back a keeper that someone was trying to keep, but I have at the end of the trip, we had our limit, and I'm filleting them, and then I'm divvying them up into bags. And at the end, you're like, oh, well, I'll split them all up, one fish in each bag. And at the end, I got like 7 fillets. I'm like, hang on, why do I only have 7 fillets? I'm like, definitely forgot to like take one of the halves off of the fish.
Oh, yeah.
I went to clean out a 5-gallon bucket once and probably threw 3 or 4 haddock, full haddock worth of fillets in the water. And I remember doing it. I'm looking around like, I don't think anybody saw me.
Mud hake.
Yeah, those just get
Those
thrown
happen
up.
intentionally.
Meanwhile, there's a trail of mud hake behind the boat.
Yeah.
Tuna food.
Oh man, that's too funny. I say we just keep going on finish bass, even though it goes into July.
So from the river, we went down into the bay for a bit. I feel like was
Yeah, we
probably
got
the
some
next step.
Yeah, we had some great days.
Amazing trolling days.
Offshore.
Offshore,
your
I bet.
best first day down there was the 4th of June, because the big boat went down there first.
Yeah.
3rd or the 4th of June is when you guys were going down.
Was that the day like chased us
That was a
down? It
couple
was
days.
like blowing like 40
That was
knots.
the tail end of it.
Perfect example of using the river as your Hail Mary.
Oh, yeah.
We went all the way down there, and the wind picked up as soon as we idled down. The fish disappeared, and then we got the shit kicked out of us.
Well, it wasn't even that day was weird. Line
It
Shad's
was
a
weird.
weird boat. I still don't know why it gets wet sometimes. Like some days it'll be 3-footers and you're like, it handles it like a champ. Some days it's like 2 foot and windy and you're like, why are we getting soaked and hammered?
Yeah.
But that trip specifically, I remember we got down there and the wind was like at our back, but we were taking crazy spray. It made no sense to me. My boots were so filled with water that when we got there, I took them and dumped them out. It was like they were completely full. I remember we were all pretty soaked by the time we got there. We're like, this is a bad. And then it was.
We felt like wicked bad. I remember Taylor and I saying, "Oh man, like."
Because you guys are on your way, and it was like
We could see you, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it
Shut
just
off.
stopped. Every pass we were getting 3 or 4, and then we see you coming, and it's like, oh, we didn't get one that pass.
Yeah.
And it's like, start looking for him, and then we're telling you, oh, we're not on him anymore. Look for him, and then it was like nothing
Dude,
happened.
we put
those
that whole.
things vanished.
So we went there, got the shit kicked out of us, kind of tried working our way home trolling, and we just weren't getting anywhere. Picked up, ran to the mouth. Mouth was dead in the water. At that point, the water temp, it wasn't like 60, it was 65. It was the sweet spot, and it was like 61 in the mouth, and we were marking and like caught like 2 rats. I was like, what the fuck? And then you were like, oh, I drove my boat home last night and marked the piss out of them on the straightaway.
Yep.
And then sure shit, he saved the day. It was like we had 45 minutes left in the trip.
Right.
And we limited and caught like 25 other ones.
Yeah, well, again, that was the story of the year. It's getting into that right water temperature. The fish it was like such a drastic change. If you were in the river, you had to be in that right water temperature, or you were sitting there waiting for the temperature to get to you.
Yeah.
And on a charter, it can you only got 2-3 hours to maybe make it happen. Especially you're losing tide, yada yada, and you can't always wait for it to get to you.
But we rallied. It was a sick rally too. The guys were fired up.
Those charters are tough when they have a time constraint or whatever, and you just know that there's only a certain amount of time during the day that's going to be good.
And
And then when you get there and it might not be as good as you thought, and you're like, oh boy.
yeah, you
It
gotta
was with me with,
staying patient is key.
It is.
The Taylor lumber guy, Lenny Taylor and his
I was
kids.
with you when we went to whale watching.
Yeah, I
so.
remember like we were trying to catch a fish, couldn't catch anything.
Yeah.
And then finally like the timing and the tide just right at the end of the trip.
Yeah.
And we went into Smith's and like slammed them for like a half hour. They forgot about the whole rest of the day.
Well, they wanted to see whales, and we went out there, and there was like a badass tuna bite going on, and we are just like drifting around like everybody's on. We're like, yeah, check the whales out, you know. We got 2 rods out, and they wanted to catch bass and kind of pulled it off. But like 30 minutes, I don't know what we caught, 20 fish or something.
Yeah, it was like slammed them, and they forgot about the whole rest of the day. Like, you know, I like that after late, you know, bite. Same with tuna. Like, you know, you get a bite that hadn't had anything happen all day, and you're like 1 minute, and you get one, and the people, the whole ride home, they're so excited, and you know, it's just
one improvement that you guys made this year was you actually caught stripers in Boston Harbor.
Did they?
Dude.
They did well. In the first part of the tournament, everybody's like, what the hell is Fortuna doing? Because we were just freaking
You were on the meat first.
Oh, yeah. Over by, what's it?
We caught him
Thompson's Island? No.
Just on the end of the airport there.
Yeah, no, that's
Spectacle? Thompson? Yeah.
One of the islands.
No, the
Thompson
story
with the
of
big brick building.
Yeah.
the story of Boston for us is it's always a corporate adventure. You get there late. You're always like kind of trying to figure out the bite. By the time you figure out the bite's pretty much over, and the boat's slow.
And the ferry traffic is ferocious by the time we start.
I honestly would rather chew glass like 7 out of 7 days a week than fishing in there. It's brutal. I mean, it's not bad.
Right.
Some days when there's like a good pogey bite going on, but
no, Fortuna isn't the best boat for fishing Boston Harbor. You want to be fast and mobile because they move quickly with the tide and yada yada. And sometimes you have to play whack-a-mole. There's a bunch of spots that can be good, but they're not good every day. And you know, to hit all those spots, it might be in a 7-mile swath. And you know, when you're hopping around 2 miles here, 2 miles there, if you can be there and you know go 2 miles and
there's a lot of places like Rock too that like if you know them, Eddie used to fish in Boston Harbor all the time, and just like we do Rock. I mean, Rock used to just back right up to these little spots and
100%.
But if you threw your bait over there, you caught nothing. If you threw your bait right there, you got one. Just like you know.
No, and the other thing too is we're just not dialed in with Boston. We're not fishing it every day. We don't know. We don't talk to enough people in there. So the only reason we go in there is for these corporate adventures.
I like it. I like the change of pace.
Yeah, Mike likes going.
By the time we're in there, it's June. We've like kind of been rivered out for a bit. Yeah. You get to explore, and then you know you leave early doing your bait mission. You can kind of like, you know, check out 21 area, mine it, and like work that kind of edge the whole way up.
I like
and
that
just see
spot you guys
on.
found off of Cohasset. Those couple rocks right there.
Keep those quiet.
Yeah, right. That was pretty consistent.
Yeah, that was sick.
We had some good days there.
Still the best day though was the meat eater mass fishery day.
Oh yeah, that was nuts.
That was just like a gift. Just put it.
They even put that on there.
They have, yeah. We have the draft video. It's
great.
Nasty.
It's really
it's
good.
Going on meat eater. It's going on.
Long story, not long story, but Division of Marine Fisheries recreational side, Ben Gahagan led the charge on doing a like striped bass tactics and release video. So they partnered with Ryan Callahan and Meat Eater to do basically the what do you call it? To host it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Ben and all those guys went as well. But basically, we had intentions of going to the Cohasset spot that we'd been fishing, and we got bait insanely easy, and we got a mile towards that spot, and it was just like Jurassic Park bass.
Yeah, there was just fish everywhere, demolishing pokies and mackerel, birds everywhere. And
3 hours.
We were the only boat there to start. It was nuts. I couldn't believe it.
It was insane.
It was very lucky.
And there was a little trepidation because I feel like it had been great there.
Oh,
and
then it died.
And then for like the week prior, the 5 days prior, 4 days prior, whatever it may have been, it was like we had, I want to say, 2 bass trips, and it was kind of a struggle fest. It was like maybe it would go off for, an hour and a half first light, and then just after first light, it was like nothing. You're struggling to get 1 or 2 fish, offshore.
The thing that changed that morning is we marked those perfect bass-sized mackerel schools were that entire edge.
Right.
Like, remember we were like, there was like a week period where we were kind of struggling to get bait. We were going to Stone Ledge a lot.
Yeah, you'd catch them at like, there'd be like maybe a pile off of like Davis Ledge off Cohasset, and maybe a pile here. But then like you get up to the zone, where we were fishing that offshore edge, cutting back and forth, and there wasn't really any bait to speak of.
No, and the pogies weren't as consistent. But that morning, that Taylor and I are talking about, there was pogies mixed in with the max. The pogies were like in tight towards the rocks. The max were out in like 60, 70 feet of water. And the bass were on the mackerel to start. And then when all that surface feed stuff started happening, like the pogie schools were tight, they're blowing them out of the water.
So to talk specifics on it, the Plymouth bite and then this northern bite kind of more up off of Cohasset, like when you're looking at your depth finder and trying to figure out how to actually catch these offshore bass, tide plays a big role. Are the fish feeding right now plays a big role, and how you would identify that is when you're driving along in your boat, looking at your depth finder, and you're marking these little arches. They look like bass hugging the bottom, and that's just what I think they are. I think we all think they are. You see them, they're just hugging the bottom. You might as well not even fish there because they're not feeding right now. But keep in your mind, like maybe you're, it's 2 hours till slack tide low and those fish are hugging the bottom. Well, I would bet money, in this made up situation that once it hits slack tide low, maybe 20 minutes after that tide change, those fish are going to rise up. And especially if you're marking some clouds of bait in that area, they're going to come up and start feeding again once that tide gets changing. Yep. And so when we're having these epic bites, we're marking more often than not, you're not seeing anything on the surface. You're just seeing bass mid-column, and that's, for offshore bass fishing, that's in a nutshell what you're looking for. Those mid-column bass with some movement when you go over them. Yeah. When you run them over in the boat, you have like 4 X-wraps out the back, maybe staggering depths. And when you run them over, you're seeing them streak up. And
like tunas.
And they're real active. Those are fish you're going to catch. But when you're just driving, you're like, they're on the bottom. We should get them. I know they're here. Like, they're there, but they're not eating right now. And
perfect example, too, is backside of the Cape.
Yep.
Peaked Hill, it's the same thing. You get there in the morning, they're mid-water, up in the shallows. And then as soon as they stop feeding, they go to the bottom and then go to the edge. The only way to catch them then is either live bait or jigging.
Yeah. Right. You can trick them, but it's not like...
No.
It's not a bloodbath. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work for the results.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, that day was just like... Taylor and I looked at each other in the first 30 seconds and we were just like, is it really?
I saw like, we all saw the birds at the same time. As soon as I saw them, I like turned around and grabbed the rod. Brian wasn't even off plane and I threw a rod. I threw like, I want to say it was one of those either pogies or NLBNs or something. I threw something way back and I just locked it up and he came off plane. It was like, and it was like a 40-something incher like right away. And I think Ryan was just like, holy shit.
Yeah. And they had a good day fishing the North Shore a couple days prior. Like, I think they did like 15 fish and I think they were kind of fishing similar, like you were saying, fish weren't biting. They hung on them. Tide change came or current started flowing. They bit and they, maximized the hour window. Right. But this was just like you 3 hours straight. Yeah.
It was like that day you guys, that was 2 years ago. Commercial day, and you're like, "Yeah, go, Dad." I said, "Tell what, you guys go in the little boat,
yeah.
And if you get on them, call me. I'll get in the big boat and go out there and grab one of you guys." And I'd like get out. You guys are like, "Wait, we're on!" Like I forget what
we had 2 left to go.
Yeah, we had like 2 left. I get out there, I like throw 2 rods out before they were done. Next thing I'm like, "I need help!" On the radio, "Get over there!" Like,
yeah,
that was pretty sick.
That was a fun,
I literally
fun day.
Commercial fished for, I don't know, half hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you got on the boat.
Yeah, we quadded up.
And we got our last one. Ben jumped on, and while you were quadded, reeled those in, and I think you guys finished up as I was
Yeah, it was like we
repacked.
started turning home when we were like halfway done and freaking finished up.
That was a sick
And somehow we were like the boat that stayed on the fish because everybody else like all of a sudden spread out and it like ended right after that.
It all slid out to Davis though. It was like north of Minot, and then it all started sliding off.
We ended up almost at the 21 can. I feel.
Yeah,
like
you guys found it inside.
Yeah.
I got there. It was like Davis Ledge, and by the time we left, we were like coming home from the 3 mile line.
Yeah.
What's the ledge north of Davis? The hump there begins with an H.
21. Hardings.
Hardings Ledge. Yeah.
That's kind of where it's actually started that morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Hardings, because like we kind of like heard that there was a couple guys on them, and then we just kept trolling basically southeast.
But it was weird. They must have been doing a big circle because like for like 2 weeks.
Starts at Hardings.
Started there, work its way up, and then shoot out to the 3 mile line at 21.
Right, and it was
and
over.
The next morning, it was the same thing.
And to the same token, we weren't doing as much, but they were shooting out to, they're going from Thieves Ledge into Hardings down to Davis out to like the 21 can. They're running that big loop.
Yeah.
But they escape into the 3 mile.
Right. In between,
Then you can't find them.
21
Or
and
you can't
Thieves,
fish
they
for
go
them.
out somewhere, in the abyss.
What was crazy too is while all that was going on, there was that crazy biomass of pogies in the middle of the bay, like fishing ledge to
and
high
no fish
pines,
on it.
and no fish on, except for those first couple days that you guys were X-wrapping, but you weren't even X-wrapping on the pogie schools.
Right.
Then they
we
all
were like
showed
offshore. Oh, we were marking balls of pogies on the bottom.
Yeah. But then they all showed like heavy, like that
it's
pogie school
nuts,
was
dude.
massive whales in it, but there was nothing really in it.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was.
Like I'm sure there were, when we weren't down there, I'm sure
It was
guys
like an hour-long bite here and there.
Yeah.
I'd hear about it from random people.
That thing that went on a couple of years ago down there, that was like the weirdest thing. Like, I have never seen a spot around us that held that many fish for as long as
Manament?
that
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
Yeah, that was
like
insane.
that. I mean, I've been fished Race Point, friggin' Wellfleet, Backside, everywhere when there's been those big biomasses, but they never lasted like
long,
3
yeah.
weeks
Yeah.
like that. Like,
it was
with
almost
whales
2
in
months,
it.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a long time.
It never stayed in like such a tight location ever.
It did happen like that.
It did. It happened this year, not as long, but
Boston, it
same
happened.
thing.
Like there were some melee days up there when all those pogies were pushed up in the hunt and the tunas were in
Yeah,
there.
Nahant was pretty
and
crazy.
There were some guys that kept it quiet, like on the bass front and the tuna front up there, and it was pretty steady.
Yeah, but it didn't last months.
Not like the
you know,
Manamet
It
boat.
lasted a couple
No.
weeks, whatever. It's like
Yeah.
it's usually the case.
So
I mean, the pogies held up there this year too. They were there, just there wasn't as many bass on it.
Yeah.
I'd gone down on one of the off days, and me and my wife and my mother went down. We were going to just go grab lunch in Plymouth. And I'm like, somewhere on the ride down, I found out that my mother had never caught a striped bass in her life before. I'm like, all right, you've never caught a striped bass before? I'm like, all right, I have an idea. So we go down to the pogies and, whatever, caught a couple bass, but it was okay. But the pogies were there. It was just like finding the bass on them was more hit or miss, I feel like.
Yeah.
There wasn't there wasn't that, herd of big slobs on them. It was more fighting through middle-sized fish, like just over slot, but, not quite giants. It was like 32 to 34 inch fish was the predominant number, at least that I saw down there.
Kind of makes sense, though. I mean, people don't eat pogies. They're like pretty nasty. I mean, even the Koreans don't eat them. Why would a fish want them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
that's got to be bleeped but kept in. One thing that did
Nobody likes the North Koreans. You don't have to bleep
They're
them.
not high on our list. One thing that did eat the pogies early, though. yeah.
They hurt us.
I think the craziest thing that happened all year, in my opinion, was, and this can pivot us into tuna fishing, was where the fish showed up first. where the tuna showed up first.
Well, don't pivot to tuna fishing quite yet because we went in. So there was all these other bites we kind of talked about a little loosely. Then there was the best bite was in these rocks, and we kept going to the rocks.
Yeah,
you know, it was like to the point. It wasn't Manomet, but it was as stupid as Manomet, and it made no sense at all. But there's this one spot you go and you cast into it, and it however many mackerel you had, dead or alive, didn't matter. If you got close to this spot, it was just
on the right tide.
Yeah, it was like a video game cheat code.
It
you
really
just
was.
cast in.
Yeah.
It got to the point, I think in the span of a 2-week period on the little boat, Brian and I must have caught 2,000, over slot size fish.
Yeah.
To the point where our hands, we got like some sort of fish.
You guys were all diseased this summer.
We got
Ben and I had
disease.
that was not good.
Yeah.
I still have
Mycobacteriosis.
scars from all that shit all over my hands.
Yeah, so at first we thought it was poison ivy, and that lasted for like a couple days. Then we're like, this isn't poison ivy.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't even been in the woods at this point. And, it got to the point you were taking some antibiotics and stuff. You had like creams and ointments and Band-Aids and gloves.
I don't know. I can probably have George put some pics. I took some pictures of my hands, but I had sores all over my hands.
Yep.
They were like the size of dimes.
Yep.
And they would blister, and then like it would basically be like it went from a blister to a wart to gone. Yeah, is what my hands were.
Yeah, they open up. So like when you catch a bass, if you look at them, sometimes they have these red sores on their stomach, and that's literally what you end up getting. And I think it's if you're handling a lot of fish, you got like their teeth cut you up a little bit. You have those open sores on your hands, and then you handle the fish, and then that bacteria, whatever, can get transferred onto you, and then you get it.
When we were trying to come up with the cause, remember I was texting you pictures? Mm-hmm. I had the wart on this thumb, and then I was going back. I was like holding that, but you could see the bass.
Yeah, you could see the red sore on the bass and touching like your
that
sore.
hand, and then this thumb had it because that was my gripper thumb. But it was not fun. Like it was like painful.
Well, now in hindsight, though, we know how to deal with it. It's doxycycline.
Yes.
That's that knocks it out. I mean, I think that kills everything.
Yeah, your skin just refreshes.
The problem is,
Yeah.
you have to wear insane sun protection if you're taking that stuff.
I got so sunburned from it, like literally to the point where your fingers are getting sunburned, and it feels like someone's stabbing daggers in it. But it knocks out the infection right away.
Yeah.
It's it is no joke though, because you get it and you get messed up from it.
It actually can kill you. I was at the dermatologist and told her about it, and had her look at my hands. I didn't have it.
Right.
My hands didn't look like yours, but I had this other weird, like,
you had
itchy,
one that
bumpy
lasts for a
things,
while.
right? And it's called Mycobacteriosis marinea. And it comes from fish. And if you let it sit for too long, it actually can get into your liver and your kidneys and like actually kill you. It's bad. So if anybody does get these things, and catching a lot of, and it can come from any kind of fish too. It's not just bass. But
I got another shot of it. So bass fishing waned out, and then when we were fishing a lot of mackerel,
Yeah, because you never got the doxycycline, so it just kind of lingered. It like wasn't getting too much worse. It was kind of getting better, but like new ones were kind of popping up as you were like thinking you were almost done.
Yep.
And like mine weren't turning into open sores, and then like
you also have 10 more layers of skin on your hands compared to mine.
But no, so I got spined by a mackerel, which is why I actually went in. I got a spine in my finger, and I had this. It's pretty gross sounding now talking about it out loud, but so I had a spine in my finger and that, the sores, and my finger like pussed up really hard, and like a lot of times it gets better. But I woke up one morning, like I woke up one morning, we had the morning off, and I had like fevers and chills through the night. I'm like, okay, I should go to the doctor. So I went to the doctors, and they gave me stuff for that infection. But at the same time, for the infection from the spine, but I asked about the infection from the other stuff. And so they got the antibiotics, and that wiped mine out pretty quickly. And then you dealt with it for a while. And then
I got on the doxy train. It was, then
But that was
first
like,
dose I took, it got better the next morning.
Yeah, but that's the key, because I went from I never wear gloves while we're bass fishing just because, like, I don't know, it's hard to get hooks out. You know, you take them off.
Tying knots.
Tying knots. Yeah. Take them off, put them on, and then you inevitably get lazy and don't put them on. But at least knowing that, like, okay, if you get it, like, just go get the Doxy. That good.
You can't take too much of that, though. Like, you can only get it, like, once a year.
If you take too much, the dermatologist told me, like, you basically become immune to it.
Right.
The last thing on our gross hands. So my theory on that was where we were catching them.
Right.
The amount of bird shit 100%. All over that.
Oh, and those rocks. Yeah.
That was what I think it came from. It was getting to the bass, which was getting to us.
Yeah, and they're sitting on.
You noticed a lot of times the bass this year had those red sores, and the mackerel did too.
They did.
Right.
And the second flare up I had, like I said, was I want to say like we
Deeper
were
into
tuna fishing and loading for bass trips, bait for bass trips because we knew we still had some sprinkled in.
Right.
And just from mackerel handling, I got it again.
Right.
You guys are just gross.
Yeah, you didn't get it
Disgusting
at all,
creatures.
did you?
I didn't.
It's weird.
And I don't think what I
even
got
get like
just
bass
actually
rat.
that.
My skin's
I don't know how he
blue-twisted
does
steel.
it. I don't know how he does it, but like you handle fish without touching them. Like somehow, like you don't. I've never seen you
The
with feet up
first like
fingers.
3 years I was doing it full time, my hands were disgusting. And then I realized to just
Not touch
be a little bit of a wuss and use fish grippers and use gloves and all that stuff because
Yeah.
it's not fun.
Well, because also too, like you got
You guys always used to laugh at me because you'd be like, "You just filleted a toad and you don't even have a speck of blood on you." Like, because I don't wear Grundens, but I don't get messy. You know what I mean?
You also don't get wet. You're like a cat.
But like, I feel like a big thing
Storm
is like
petrel.
the amount you handle each fish too. Like with like a charter group, like you take the fish off the hook for them, and then like you hand them the fish if you want to take a picture, which usually entails them dropping the fish
then you
2 or
gotta pick it
3
up
times.
again.
And so you pick it up 3 times, they take it, and then they hand it back to you for you to put in the water. So like, say you catch 40 fish in a trip, you might be handling 90 to 100 fish in a trip.
Yeah.
You know, on top of the next day and the day before that. So
a lot.
it adds up a lot as far as like the chafing on your hands.
It does. Yeah. So bass fishing, what would you give it this year overall grade in our area, Massachusetts Bay?
I mean, compared to like years,
An 8.
like
Eight
our
out of
whole
10.
life, I'd say 8. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
and the reason
great,
why I
great
say
fishing.
it's better like that because for the last couple years we haven't had to go across.
Very true.
Yeah.
And even if you do go across, it's not as good as it's been over here.
Yeah,
Right.
true.
So it's like saving us a lot of time not having to drive friggin' 25 miles to go find bass or down deep into the bay or up north or whatever. But
It is a little weird when you got a 10-hour trip scheduled for bass and you're like, why am I going? I don't need to go to the race. All the big ones are over here. So it is really nice.
We did some sightseeing.
Yeah.
We had one charter, not this year, last year. We stopped for lunch, like the bass stopped biting. We stopped at Rote, grabbed lunch, hung out, and that was all part of it. And they were awesome.
Yeah.
They didn't care.
we used to get a lot of those when we were fishing the race a lot. Like people would fish the morning and then like, oh, can we? Or no, it was more like,
Oh, God. You got to take that one out.
Oh, I love it.
come on, you guys are killing me.
We'll leave some of it.
All of my quality material wasted.
I mean, one time I with a guy to ride home. I'm kidding. I didn't need a ride home.
So, bassing, I think that's a good ender on bass.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about having sex with
Yeah,
me.
that's a good ender. That's a solid wrap-up joke.
Yeah, the rock fishing, that was sort of like the end of where we ended the bulk of our bass fishing.
We did do some across.
Yeah.
That was kind of like we caught a tuna. Let's
Yeah.
go get some bass.
Combo trips. Yep.
which are enjoyable. I like doing combo trips over towards the tip of the Cape. Like when you're having a run, like when we were cod fishing, going out to Big Cod, then running to Peaked Hill, and like it's just a lot.
I like that, Peaked Hill tuna, come back, catching bass trip.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I also don't mind the Western Edge tuna and then rip into the rocks after.
Right.
Because you go in there like if you know that bite window, you know you have the most primo bait possible. Like Ben and I had a couple days where we were throwing mackerel in there that were absolutely enormous.
Yeah. And they're still choking it down. Yeah, you didn't really know what size fish you were going to catch. It could be anything from a slot fish to 50-incher, in that spot. But
no, it was good.
Everyone's going to be trying to find that spot.
And then guys started seeing tunas on the Pogey schools down, kind of off Boston first. Like the first rumor.
Everywhere inshore for
for a week. Like very beginning of June.
Well, we went down thinking that Manamed might be on fire, and then drifted, and we saw a lot of tuna that day in the bay. Remember that it was like flat, calm, and you guys, was it you or Mike, came up and started drifting with us? I think Mike actually got one. Or hooked one.
Last year, Mike got one. This year, we tried one day. I'm just going to take a leak.
Well,
I don't remember that.
The start of tuna fishing this year was Brian going harpooning.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll be right back. I'm going to drain my dragon.
And when was that?
Like June 1st. June 1st, he went east, and then a couple people were saying they were seeing fish inshore.
Right.
And I texted Brian. I was like, people are seeing them inshore. You might want to check it out on the way back. And then he got a text from like 3 or 4 different people, him and Jeff. Next thing you know, they came in and they were just all over Stone Ledge, south of Stone Ledge, all the way up to Boston.
That was not, as Jeff and I said after that day. Well, that wasn't on our bingo card.
Yeah.
We ran a Wildcat 40 miles. What did we see out there? We saw 2 whales, pollen line. We worked the pollen line for a little bit. And we actually saw
basking shark?
Saw a white shark. And the white shark was our next trip. What did we see? We saw albies. Big albies. Like, what's a big albie? Like an 8-pounder, 12-pounder?
I couldn't even tell you.
It's like a really big one. We saw albies pushing like tunas. That was the only thing we saw out there, V-waking. Remember we saw one in the lights.
Yeah.
Same size.
Yep.
East of that.
Yep.
Saw them pushing. No tunas. Water temp was right. Decent amount of life there. And then, to your point, we got intel that we went way past them. And we ended up 8 miles in front of the harbor staring at the windmill off Scituate, and it was just acres and acres and acres of fish, which led to our first tuna scouting day on Fortuna, 8.8 miles out of the harbor trolling spreader bars on our first day.
Yeah, like June 2nd or 3rd.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I've caught a lot of my first tuna in between like the Western Edge and Stony.
Yeah.
Especially when we used to troll a lot early,
Yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of bait in the beginning of the year inside. Like even most of the herring are all inside.
Right.
Like all the sea herring are all just on the first drop off. They're not really on the bank.
And like we said, almost, June and July for sure, there was so much small mackerel and, inshore, like on those inner ledges, that it was like, it was surprising that there wasn't more feeding fish there.
Right.
But it was like, I feel like the story of the spring inshore was every time you'd get to that like 3-4 mile line first drop off, you were seeing 2 or 3 tuna busts like just driving by it. And you're like, it drove you crazy because we tried a handful of times, inshore, and you're like, they're here. You're visually seeing them, but you might drift for 4 hours and not mark anything. And it was a little.
Well, you don't see them once you stop.
Yeah,
right.
I
think you're driving fast through and you see them jump, and then you're like, oh, stop.
Right.
I almost think they're just pushing through, and you actually spook them, and they're almost checking you out by jumping,
right,
or crashing, and then they're just gone.
So our first tuna scout day, we really didn't get to scout much because of what we saw early days of June harpooning. And then June 10th was our first bank bait fishing day, like live bait fishing day. And the first 5 minutes,
we hook up.
thought it was a poor beagle and ended up being a 100-incher that we pulled the hook
We're all
on.
just like slow playing it. We're like, it's a shark. And Taylor's like, I'll stay on the rod. I don't think I've ever seen Taylor like stay on a rod like intentionally for that long before. And we're like, it's a shark. And then we're all just standing there, kind of didn't get anything ready. And then like all of a sudden it's just at the back of the boat broadside. And it was like a mid 100-incher, just like sitting there. And then all of a sudden the thing just took off and was like, wait, I'm a tuna, I'm gonna run. And we're like all just a little dumbfounded. We're like, wow, that quick, just go to the spot where you sat,
last day last year
and just hook them right there. I guess that's what you do.
It was crazy. Then we ended up releasing a short after that. So that was our first catch.
Did we get 2 shorts?
Well,
no, we got one.
It wasn't
one
a catch because we wanted to contain him and take him home and make him ours, and he got away.
Well, the short we released. The short we actually touched.
Yeah. We got the
100-incher we did not catch.
We didn't, no. He was gut hooked pretty bad, we think, and he chafed us off, I think, in
we pulled the
20
hook.
minutes or pulled the hook.
He was gut hooked.
Yeah.
Remember, he like took no string. That's why we thought he was a shark.
Yeah.
And then a couple days later, kind of staying on the theme of tunas in Boston, down Stone Ledge, Northwest Corner was pretty good.
Yeah.
Remember, it was like National Geographic bait, whales, krill.
We were talking temperature, theme of the year, temperature maybe. But we were sitting on Middlebank, and we were hearing chatter that Northwest Corner was pretty good, and we're sitting there. The water was kind of cold. I forget specific numbers, but the water was cold for what we had been seeing. And we were sitting there, it wasn't looking great, and we started heading north. And as we got to where the bank starts to bump out at the top end of Middlebank, and we kind of were cutting across the high ground, and the temperature started rising. I think we saw like a 5-degree temperature swing as we got up there. And it was like a hard line where as soon as we got to a certain point, the temperature rose up, and sure enough, there was guys getting bites, and we ended up getting bit up there.
Yep.
Whales, life, birds, mackerel,
Herring.
Krill.
Right, and herring as well.
Yeah, it was really good. It didn't last long though. It was
like maybe 2 weeks.
We ended up, let's see.
I feel like we were a little late to that.
We were there. So we caught like a 90-incher there.
I don't even think it was 2 weeks there.
It wasn't. 3 days later, Taylor and I ran the big boat. We got a 107, and that's when it was 3 fish bag limit. So we stayed. Then we released the 70-incher after that, and then commercial bass 6 hour.
We bass fished a lot right after that.
And then we fished. So we were only at Northwest Corner a couple of days, and that bite lasted about a week, like you said, like a week to 10 days. And then we were back on Middlebank, and it was relatively slow. Somewhere
in that same time frame, I took my boat to those inner ledges where we were fishing early, and I did end up hooking one inshore.
The Great White Shark Day was the end of June when we saw that, when we thought it was a Mako and all that.
Whenever that
you had hooked up
was
before,
right. It was
before
right in that same time.
Yeah,
frame.
you got that one at Stone Ledge.
Yep, that was a cool trip. We were in the back and forth bass tuna schedule.
Yeah,
and we go out. We had a couple of little kids. We'd had them for a couple of years. And we were like, we'll go to the outer ledges. We brought some tuna rods. We brought some bass rods. And as soon as we get out to the ledges and we're trying to get bait, we weren't marking any bait. So we're like kind of freaking out a little because we like now had driven 6 miles to go get bait and we weren't getting it or marking any. And then it just ended up being that the bait was so high on the surface that you wouldn't actually mark it. And then we loaded the live well just like under the boat.
We slowed down because I searched like kind of slow, like went over the first high spot, came down into the trench, and then we were working up the next high spot on the ledge. And as soon as I came up, I marked like a smidge. Like, we pulled it back. I don't even think we had a sabiki in yet, and that tuna shoots up.
Oh, yeah, right. Shoots right out.
Shoots up. We take the first mackerel off the string and throw it on a 130.
Yep.
Then we loaded.
Yep.
And then the shark showed up.
Yep.
That was cool. I had never seen... We had 3 great white shark sightings this year.
Yeah.
And I hadn't had one close encounter really my whole life until this year, which was really cool.
Saw a few. Saw one giant one. on Middle Bank.
That one at Southwest Corner was so big.
Right up on the high ground. It looked to be like, it was like Jaws. It looked like Jaws. It was like a 25-foot great
It was
white. I know
humongous, dude.
people say that's probably bogus, but it was massive. I mean, we both saw it and we're like, that's a great white. That's not a basking shark.
And especially after seeing Frank's footage on the whale.
Oh, yeah.
And then we were able to get size comparison. We were like, that animal was equally as big. And then Frank actually saw the same shark same day that we did. Remember we were chatting with him at the dock?
Yeah.
That fish was huge.
The one I saw jump was real big. It went like the long way head to tail as it jumped, not straight up like you see on TV there.
Yeah.
And it was definitely like big minke whale size. That's what it looked like to me.
Crazy. Yeah,
But that's the only one I actually physically saw this year.
Yeah.
I think we had a couple of fins we might have like thought, but
Who was with me at the end of the year? We saw that weird shark.
Oh yeah, it was me and you. We think it was a big mako. And
It was brown. It was like a brown shark, but the body of a mako.
right.
I don't know if it was just a weird sun.
could have been a dusky. Duskies are pretty streamlined, and they're along the Cape.
They're more brown.
We tried
It was weird.
We
They
tried
wouldn't
to
touch
catch
anything.
that thing.
They go
like crazy.
Matter of fact, they breed in the that creek in Duxbury Bay.
No, that's sand tiger sharks.
Isn't that what a dusky is?
No,
No,
Duskies offshore, sand tiger sharks are more like inshore, sandy
Look
bottom.
like they need braces.
They eat a lot of like die off from pogie schools and like.
Did it have a dorsal ridge or whatever it was called?
an inner dorsal.
It looked like a mako body.
Yeah, it looked like a mako.
But it was brown.
Yeah.
And when we tried live bait, dead bait, everything, we circled it like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Wouldn't touch anything.
We were like,
is it a baby basking shark? But then like it didn't have the didn't have that.
No, and then it moved kind of fast sometimes. It wasn't. It was like it was aggressive. It just didn't want what we had.
Yeah.
I don't know what it wanted.
I don't know what it was.
To stay on the tuna train.
We got a few trolling at the end of June too, or one at least.
So we started inshore for a couple days. Then we went to Middle Bank, and we had some success there.
Yep.
Went up to Northwest Corner.
Got one there.
And then we
got
went
2 there.
Then we were back to Middle Bank pretty much. Right.
Then it was slow. The harpooners were doing pretty good. Then we trolled. You guys trolled one at Peaked Hill on the 25th,
Yeah.
and
We were actually going to go to Peaked Hill when we found that shit right on the south tip.
yeah,
Like, well, so why are we going to Peaked Hill? We got tuna here. Remember, that was like the first day we caught like multiples on Southwest Corner.
I think that was after.
Your jump.
I
Yeah.
think that was after. I know the day you're talking about, but I think that
But it was during the time we started going to
It was
Peaked Hill.
right after the first Peaked Hill trolled fish. And then, so you guys had trolled one there. Then I had like with Ben and Mike O'Leary and the boys, we had like a sliver of weather in the morning. We shot out. That's the one that ate.
Yep.
We couldn't catch bait.
Yep.
Ben,
That's up Middle Bank,
at
right?
Middle
Yeah.
Bank.
Yep.
Ben, we had just freshened up and it was, I don't know, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. We finally had just freshened up our max. And Ben goes to reel in the far floater and takes 3 cranks on it. And the thing smokes it.
No, well, so that was pretty funny. It's pretty rare to get a reeling in bite because it's probably. You were talking about.
Oh, you reeling
Mike in. And Oh, right.
Yeah.
So like, it's not pretty often that you get a bite while you're reeling in, and we're reeling. The bait had been out there. I think we've been dealing with some small sharks this year. There was like baby porbeagles around, and they wouldn't quite pull your balloon down. And if you're fishing a floater where your balloon's on a bite, usually your balloon pops if you get a bite. It pops off your line, and something's happened. But we had seen it kind of get heavy a few times, and we're like, that bait's. I'm reeling in kind of slow because we always kind of try and preserve our baits, don't drown them. And Brian's just like, reel it in fast. That thing's dead. And I start reeling, and I'm reeling fast, and the next thing you know, it piles up, and I'm like, that's a tuna, and it's screaming out some line. And we got the kids on the rod, and we ended up catching it. Yeah, it was, what was it, like a 60 something? Yeah.
The best part about it was the boys are troopers, and it wasn't the calmest day.
Yep.
And one of them was a little woozy, and
he held it together.
Almost
all the way.
And then I asked them if you want to take if they want to do a family picture, which they agreed. And we get the fish up on their laps. I have this all on my live photos. Get the fish up on our laps, and he throws up like as soon as I get
That's
this
amazing.
picture. Like it's projectile in the video. I'm gonna send it to him when he gets a little bit older, but it was pretty funny. But yeah, so we started off. It was a pretty good June in comparison to.
We just didn't get enough time because of striper fishing.
Yeah, a lot more bass trips. You did get the longest fish of the year in June.
Yeah, 112.
112 on the 27th.
So then this is all Middlebank, and then
Yeah.
Yeah, so we went Middlebank, Northwest Corner, back to Middlebank.
yeah.
And then
And it was mostly mackerel bites. I don't think there was much for herring around there.
Yeah.
There was some herring that came through, but not much. It was mostly all
we got
mackerel.
a lot on herring. We got
Early we were
both
getting
of
them
them.
on herring?
All the ones on Northwest Corner were on herring, and still getting them on herring all the way through June.
a few on Max too, though. That short was on
Maybe
a
the
Mac.
short.
Yeah.
All the giants were on herring though,
Yeah.
all the way until the first week of July. We started getting a couple on stick max and whiting and herring, kind of a little bit of everything.
Well, didn't we end up over at Old BE the end of June?
That was, towards the end. That was July. So then, the week of the 4th, Southwest Corner slow, Middlebank, Southwest Corner slow, Middlebank kind of turned back on a little bit, bass trip. And then we went back to Middlebank. The 7th, Dad and I fished with Flip. We had a 95-incher, lost a 110. One was on a whiting. One was on a stick mackerel. And then bass. The Bruces were here at that time.
Yeah, so that was back to Middlebank.
Back to Middlebank.
This
got
is when
that.
Middlebank was really starting to slow.
Right.
Yeah.
Overall, like bait was going down. Tunas were apparently still there, even though we kind of stopped
Right.
Yeah.
fishing it.
It was like a highway spot with not much bait for that time. And
Yeah,
then,
I feel like one of the last days at Middlebank, I think me and you were there.
Yeah,
we
we were.
were like, this place isn't that good. We were like, I remember me and your dad we're sitting there talking, and we're like, yeah, we gotta go and look around. Like, this isn't the strat. And then we end up at like 2:00. We hooked one anyways, and that was like our last. We never went back, but we almost never didn't catch them there. Like,
Right.
It felt like it didn't make sense you were catching them there because it didn't look good. You weren't marking a lot. There wasn't great bait coming through. But somehow we were still catching them. Like it never got bad. It just started feeling like you were getting lucky.
I think what happened, like after that, like at the end of that slow, the weather turned, and we did the old wind thing.
goes
And,
south and
yeah.
yep.
So you'll probably find right after that we switched down to Peaked Hill in Southwest Corner.
so Southwest Corner really started taking off for us / in general.
13th of July.
Yeah, 13th of July. So we had a release with that family that came for 2 days. Yeah, Southwest Corner turned on middle to end of July.
Crazy herring.
And that was the best bite. So this year we had different spells with what you could have fished one rod the majority of this year. And I mean, like, I wouldn't recommend only having one rod out, but like the depth you were fishing your bait and the way you were fishing the bait, I feel like when we were fishing the edge on Southwest Corner, it was like
herring?
you could fish a down rod herring only, and like you knew, like you had other baits out, but you're like, those baits don't mean anything to me. It was like we caught like 20 to 30 fish in a row where it was like
Only
down
down
rod.
rods.
What'd you catch? Down rod, yeah, down rod herring, down rod herring, down rod herring,
Yep.
down rod herring.
Yep.
And it was weird. You could put all 3 rods at the
Yeah.
same depth,
And it still wouldn't work.
and it still wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I think we went on like a 3-week spell on Fortuna. We never got a floater bite.
Right.
Never got a bite on a balloon bait.
Right.
It's the shadow line theory.
Yeah.
So strange.
We had a lot of lost fish in a couple days. So we
Yes.
pulled the hook on one with my neighbor. Then 2 days later, We tail hitched like a absolute slob, chafed that one off. You guys chafed 2 off.
Hey, we lost like 4 in a row or something like that.
And then we got like a 95 incher. I think that's when Frank mated for me.
Yeah.
That one day we got a 95 incher.
This spring
there
was
just
some
steady like that. For
it started off
weeks.
with pretty much really big fish all spring. There was a lot of those 105 plus inch fish.
Yeah.
And have we got past the day me and you went to
I was
Southwest
going to
Corner
say
yet?
my
It's
favorite,
right in
my
that
favorite
time.
day was the day the guy broke rule number 3.
Yeah, well, we got there. We had a good returning crew.
This is a great
and we get there, and not very long after we get there, we hook up, and we caught probably one of the
It
biggest
was definitely in the 1,200-pound range. And if I knew that trophy was still open, we would have killed it. But
fish. It was
Ben
really big.
really loved you.
It,
Oh, yeah.
no, dude, it was so
like
big.
flying up
Yeah.
a quick 1,200 pounder.
well,
It was so big, though. Even he was like, at first he was like, yeah, that's really big. But then, like, the next day we caught like a 105.
Yeah.
He's like, that one really was big.
well, like, I feel like, I don't know, like, I have a pretty good judge of size, but in like relation to your regular surroundings, like when you're on like line shy, you're closer, you're on a smaller boat, everything looks a little bit bigger. And so I'm like kind of calibrated to that. Like more often than not, I feel like we catch a fish and like we guess and like we're within an inch of what size the fish is. So like you have a pretty good judge, but then like I get on Fortuna and you're higher, you're a little further away from the fish, and the fish always look a little bit smaller on Fortuna.
Yeah.
Sometimes you pull them in and you're like, it's 102, and then you're like, it's 110.
Yeah.
But like that fish, I was like, it's pretty big, and you were saying it was like over 1,000. I'm like, I figured it was close, but so then we caught a few that we actually put a tape in the water, and like we were getting straight line 110 inches, and I'm like, you're like, is that bigger? And I'm like, no. And you're like, all right, maybe it was really big.
Tell him about.
No, I'm telling you, it was really big.
So back to this same day, right? We caught that one. I think we
That one
caught.
took us about an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah, it wasn't too much of a battle. He pinwheeled. We got him on the swim hook, I think. Or I think he got on the swim hook twice, and he kept coughing the hook out of his mouth. But he came up, and then like he came up, he laid on the surface, he put the swim hook in. This is the crazy thing. Release day fishing just frustrates the heck out of me because you got a 1,200 pounder, like you're just playing with them at the surface. Put the hook in, let it down. Me and OG don't videotape, so there'll be no evidence of anything we ever do together, but that's fine.
But you catch every time.
Yeah. But so we hooked that one. We got him almost on the swim hook. He goes back down. We fight him back up. We try and put him on the hook again, and eventually he breaks off. Get back to the ball. And when we get back to the ball, there's this guy in like a little Grady White anchored. Like our ball is like sitting here, and his boat is maybe 50 feet in front of us.
The ball was actually behind him between his engines.
Yeah,
But he was on his own anchor.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
You know?
That's incredible.
And there might have been 3 boats on the corner this day.
There was one other boat, and that was Jeff Hubbard.
Right.
He was a little further north of us.
Yeah.
And this guy, and we pull up, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Is this your ball?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Are you going to move?" And I'm like, "No, you're going to move." Right? He's like, "Oh, okay." And he moves like, I don't know,
50 yards.
he broke rule number 3 like way too much. And so anyway, he moves, and because I'm still talking to him, like
Right.
after he's on anchor, I'm like, "Hey, dude, you're a little too close." And he kind of like both of them turn their backs, and like both Ben and I are like, "Well, they're just not even going to pay attention
Right.
to us." And then literally like 5 seconds into that, we hook up.
Yeah, we barely get our baits out again, go off for the second time. And the thing just, of course, because it's Murphy's Law. Our first fish went straight out to the deep water. It wouldn't even have mattered if the guy was hanging off our anchor ball. We would have went away. This fish, of course, Murphy's Law, the fish goes beeline straight at his boat.
Yeah. and like we weren't even off our painter line, and there's a video we have, and if you see how close we are, we're still on our painter.
Put out in public.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going straight at his boat, and if you've ever driven with OG on a release day, he's not light on the throttle. There's usually some coal rolling and water coming over the transom. It doesn't matter if it's a rough day or not. So we're going and we're heading at him, and we're like, you got to either pull in your lines, you got to drop off, you got to do something. We're coming right at you, and we're coming right at you. And
he's not looking at us.
He had ample time to do something, but yeah, he was just sitting there, and so you could see we got to maybe like our fish was under his lines. It was behind the transom. So we're like, we're going to be okay, but we're going to have to figure something out. And we're backing down. And like, you can see he like didn't do anything for too long. He was like a deer in the headlights. He was like looking to his rods, looking to like the wheel. Like, should I drop off my anchor? Should I pull in my lines? And he just froze in that. And then by the time he like made a decision to start reeling in, his lines are like coming over the cab of the boat. And Greg's like, he's like, put him over the other side. And I'm like,
I go up and over. Thinking they were going to be able to get him over the boat.
And so
Ben looks up and sees the outriggers.
There's outriggers like this that are 20 feet up. I'm like, and we got 3 lines. Like, I think he had 3 floaters and we went under all 3 of them. And so we got it over the rod that was on the fish. And then it's coming back. And Greg's just like, up and over. And I'm like, think about it for a second. I like look up and I'm like, nope. And I always keep my pliers in my pocket. So I grab the pliers or I grab a pair of Manleys off of the fish station.
You actually had to run back because the lines are going across the pilot house.
And I grab all the lines and I go, dunk, dunk, dunk. And we're like, sorry. So we cut all 3 of the guts. Because in fairness, now there's hooks and mackerel and weights and full depth. There's 100 yards of line out coming by. And so whatever, we go off and we end up made it.
I felt bad. Yeah. So we found all like bunch of halves, like
we're gonna throw this away, but you can have it.
Bunch of top shot,
Yeah. I think he actually went back and he recrimped on all his stuff because all his balloons were still on, so he didn't actually lose his gear.
Well, if he was down at near his swivel, we only got about 10 feet off.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he had a swivel top shot.
Yeah.
But
that's hilarious.
But so we end up catching that fish, which was like over 100, 110 incher too. That was a big fish. And I think we get back. Well, we went back. We gave the guy some top shot, and we get back on the anchor, and we hooked another one, didn't we? I think we hooked one more.
I don't remember if we.
Yeah, I think we got.
You guys got 3.
But I went back, and I was going to apologize to the guy, but be like, hey, shit happens.
Right.
And he started apologizing to us first.
Right.
Well, I'm glad it was cordial.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things that like when they take that much line out and they're staying near the surface, you get to a point that there's nothing you can do.
Right.
It's either like you have hooks and stuff flying through your cockpit or you don't and you cut the lines.
Right. Well, we were almost at that point where the hooks, if I had gone any further, I stopped pretty much when the thing went in and I started thinking about, those balloons and hooks are coming flying
right into our face.
It's either that or you're just going to, even if you went around him, your fish was already under his lines. You would have sawed all 3 of his rods off anyways.
If you were to have a video of someone's expression, like Tom's expression was just like totally like...
Oh, the customer?
Yeah. He just turned around, he like looks at the camera and he's like, what the hell was that? So then he laughs because we're still on the fish.
That was so funny.
Yeah. And we had... what's his name? What's Tommy's friend? Jimmy.
He came down that morning.
He was dressed as Trump.
It was just.
Right?
It was just
had a
after
big
the assassination
on his ear and everything. It was like the day after Trump got shot.
Oh my
big
God.
sequin jacket.
Those guys are always a riot.
Yeah, that's a good.
When was that?
That was.
That was their tuna trip. So that was probably July.
July 19th.
Yeah.
Then we caught a few more, same spot. Few more. You got one on line shy, big one.
All
like 700 pounder. All like herring 12, 13. Then we had double boat day with Dave Curry, and of course it was like dead slow that day. This episode of the SeaBros Fishing Podcast is brought to you by Satfish, Satellite Fishing Technology. Satfish is the premier offshore angler's toolkit for finding productive fishing grounds. Their technology combines high-def satellite sea surface temperature, chlorophyll, high-def bathymetry, and depth contours, wind forecasts, and real-time buoy reports all into one unique platform. Satfish offers the highest resolution in sea surface temperature and chlorophyll charts on the market, and it includes cloud-free sea surface temperature for full coverage even when it's cloudy, custom 1 and 3 day composite models, over 3,000 hand-picked fishing spots and reference points across their charts, and they even have how-to tips for using the charts to find game fish. You can even download the Satfish mobile app to take your intel on the boat with you, load up the latest maps while at the dock with data, cell service. You have automatic downloads. Any layer you look at, like chlorophyll or sea surface temperature, gets saved for offline use, and then you can take it with you fishing. The map refreshes when you lose service with all the downloaded maps available offline, and you can track your position right on Satfish's charts using your device's built-in GPS signal. It's pretty sweet platform, all in one. I've had 2 seasons now to play around with it, and we like it. Satfish has excellent northeast coverage for you canyon fishermen out there, and their tools are also very valuable for the nearshore tuna grounds. Satfish is offering our podcast listeners $20 off your first year subscription if you use code SeaBros, all caps, at checkout, and visit satfish.com to give their platform a try this upcoming season. Satfish, the science of being lucky.
I feel like the natural transition from that time was all of a sudden, so southwest corner, we're sitting there, herring downrod, but specifically we're seeing, if you've ever seen a heart rate monitor, the bait, when it was going to happen, the bait started looking like peaks and valleys. And it was literally a heart rate monitor on the backtrack of your screen. Peaks, valleys, and you knew that one of those peaks and valleys a fish was going to shoot out of it.
Yeah.
More days than not, that's what was happening.
We had a lot of surface indicators too. Like
right.
The balls of max would come through on the front side of that first rip, second rip would come through.
Right. That was key, like having that.
And the whale watch boats would show up.
Oh, God.
We definitely used specifically, but I think it was probably true. We were having this thing where like it would be the peaks and valleys and herring on the bottom. And then all of a sudden mackerel would come through on a tide change. And like when the mackerel school came under your boat, camouflaging your boat enough, then that fish would streak out and eat your bait. Cause like now you were pretty much like hidden by that bait school.
Totally.
But then the herring started to dissipate a little bit, and the mackerel started staying up on the high ground, and the whales started staying on the high ground, and the bite slowed a little bit. I think it got to the point where like the whole fleet was catching on that edge, and then it got to the point where that bite window kept getting smaller and smaller, and like we stayed successful in the little pocket that we were in, and then it got to the point where it was like, okay, it's getting lucky. This like pocket of fish where the way they're filtering across was dwindling down, and then I might be jumping past Old B.
It was where we were on the corner.
Yep.
Then it was Old BE, and then
you found
and then it was the corner, but the opposite side.
So, ghetto hole, it slowed down on the edge.
So we're fishing consistently on the western edge of southwest corner. Then we get to a moon, the first moon of the season that really played a factor in how our fishing went. Big tides, and it felt like the bait and the fish got pushed further. They were
north of the high grounds.
They were coming in consistently on that edge, and then those big tides, they ended up further away, or they changed their route because the bait was getting flushed over, not hanging on that edge, and it ended up 2 miles, 3 miles north up at that high ground of the Old BE area. And then we had a couple of days which it felt a little random, but there was a couple of really good days up there.
Drifting days, we had some great days.
A bunch of years ago, I remember that, and I say this a lot when we've been bait fishing and not finding much, that backside of the high grounds where those ripply little bumps are and everything right there.
Yep.
Guys used to anchor there all the time. I mean, there used to be a fleet like sitting there anchored all the time.
Right.
Right, like maybe a mile up on the from the southern edge.
Right.
Yeah.
But out on the backside of the high grounds there.
Yeah. So yeah, we fished corner, and then we fished Old BE a few times.
Somewhere right in that same time frame, apparently there was a really good haddock bite right around that same
the
zone.
OBE, yeah.
So apparently everyone and their brother was going out there and limiting out, and we had an off day. So I take my boat. I'm like, I'm gonna go catch some haddock. I love catching haddock. I go out there, and there's like, I see far floater Jack Patrician. He's on this like massive school of surface max and birds working and stuff. And I'm like, well, I can't not go check that out. So I checked that out, and I ended up getting a little bit north of him, did a couple drifts, and I'm like, look, I think I put out a far floater. I caught mackerel. I put out a far floater, and I'm just jigging for haddock. I catch one haddock on this like little hump coming across, and I go to reset to try and like drift past there, like really focus in on the haddock. And I put my far floater out again, hook up on a tuna again, solo. Fought that one solo for like 45 minutes on a 50 by myself, and my boat's not set up for solo fighting. Ended up catching that one haddock and fighting a tuna for like, I forget exactly how long, but as much time as I had that day
to haddock.
Literally came home with one haddock and hooked a tuna. So I was like, okay, great. But whatever. But yeah, so there was a couple of good days. I think that was before we even went up there though.
It was.
Remember, I was like,
we did one drift one day. My dad and I, we had a suck
yeah,
off.
and you came back.
It looked great, but we didn't mark anything.
Yeah. And then
that was the day Mike called us down.
Because then I went up there and caught that one, and you guys were like, let's still fish the corner. And the next thing you know, I think Jeff and some of the other Green Harbor dudes were up there catching them, and we're like, all right, let's go try.
We had that one in the afternoon up there on the 29th at 1:10. And then we were kind of back to the corner a bit. We had some bass trips. And then right around the beginning of August, that one day with Nick Logan was sick. It was Mike, us on line shy, Taylor, and we had just got through those bigger tides leading up to the new moon. It was waning off at this point. That full moon kind of had us bouncing back and forth.
Did we go to the south before, like to the ghetto hole before we went to the high ground? Or was the high ground in between there?
The high ground was in between.
Yeah, so that's where I was going before. So we had those. So we were fishing the edge. We had a full moon. The fish kind of moved far up north. And then as that moon tides and those heavy tides were weakening, it felt like the fish and the bait wasn't getting pushed as far. So it was like landing more on that high ground. Then like we tried going, after we fished Old B, we tried going back to the edge and fishing the edge how we had been fishing, and it just wasn't looking the same. We were like waiting for the right part of the tide that was coming where those peaks and valleys were happening, and that it would kind of happen, but that period where the peaks and valleys, instead of being like 4 hours of peaks and valleys, it was like, a half hour it looked that good. And it wasn't, the fish were, you still could get bit, but it wasn't as good. And the whales and those mackerel schools were for the most part hanging on the high ground. So we're like, I remember the first day that we're like, it was a release day. I think we had maybe one of us got one, but like either one of the boats didn't. I think we got one early sitting on the edge. And then I think you guys sat there all day and like put in like a late day and just didn't get one. And then we both had release day charters the next day, and we were like, okay, there's been whales and like visually mackerel schools and Perfect Seas has been up there commercial mackerel fishing, and we're like, let's try drifting the high ground. And I think you guys sat the edge, and we
forgot about when we were going to Peaked Hill, and Dale and I stayed on the bank. And you guys went to Peaked Hill.
But that's
we
later.
had like 5 fish.
Yeah.
Like
that's
8 o'clock.
That's later though.
But
was it later?
You guys sat where we've been sitting.
Yep.
Ben and I went up, and our first drift, it was like piranhas.
We like so.
Yeah, you guys missed a bunch. And
The key was finding where the whales were. I felt like the whales would set up in a slightly different zone and setting up so you drift into the whales. And we were going slightly east of the whales and drifting into them. And so we see these whales and birds and stuff. We're like, this looks as good as anything. Like, let's give it a go. And we drift into those whales on the high ground, 60, 70, 80 feet of water, and fishing our floater mid down. And as soon as we like get anywhere close to it, we hook up on the far suck off, miss it. And for like that first, I don't know what, hour and a half, 2 hours, it was like as quick as we were putting out baits and resetting, it was just like bites, this. And they were biting so crazily on the mackerel. Like I think the first one was a suck off. The second one, we're trying to like reset our spread. I think we got a shark, and then we're resetting from that. I'm setting out the far floater. And next thing you know, you see the balloon we're like, oh, we're on suck off. And you can see the line spin and twirl. And it was like a 60, 70 incher, comes and swirls and flashes up by the boat, and you can see the line coming out of his mouth.
Next to the boat.
And
that's right sick. Next to the boat.
So we got I think we got 2 suck off bites, and then we hooked one, fought it for 5 minutes, and then he pulls the hook. We're like, what the heck are we doing?
Then we fought one for a while, almost got a Palm Beach and lost that one. I think we had 5 bites and not a single release.
Yeah, I think maybe we got the last one.
Yeah.
But so specifically this year, you guys have always said it, and I'm like, I don't know. Taylor hates mackerel. Mackerel bites are inconsistent. Everyone says it. And I'm like, this year it went from we're fishing herring down rods, and every fish that we hooked all season up until this point was right in the corner. Perfect. Don't mess up and you're going to catch this fish. Then it went to mackerel bites, and we missed 5 bites in a row pretty much. Or got 5 messed up bites.
Oh, I get it now.
I'm like, okay, I get it. It went from okay, this, we know what we're doing to do we even know how to fish anymore?
Yeah.
And, but so yeah, we went up there, and then we fished the high ground for a while. That was a good little fishery.
Yeah. And then we had kind of a doldrum day or two.
Yeah, drifting the high ground.
George is getting restless, so we might have to make this a 2-part.
The three of us, Mike, us, and Taylor was running the big boat with Mike. Remember, we all split out, spread apart on the corner.
Yep.
Because we still weren't sure at that point where they were coming on anymore.
Right.
We had gone through that tide cycle. Then Taylor left, went back to Old BE, said the birds were there, but he didn't mark a single fish. Then he steams down, and we watch him go past. We had marked a few, and it looked pretty good. We were sitting southwest corner proper.
Yep.
And then he doesn't even get the rod in the water. He's like,
and they're off.
I'm on. It looks ridiculous down here.
Right.
We dropped off Rodan down there.
Let's go
and
back.
It was the same shit that we were seeing.
And somebody for the last 3 weeks has been like, when it's been looking like this, the ghetto hole seems like it's been the place that they go.
I did say that for a couple weeks.
He was saying, he's like, where I think I would go. And he was literally, Greg was saying, spot on. It turns out we end up going there. And then that was our next good bite. But Taylor ended up sitting
unreal bite.
Yeah,
over there.
But then through that whole couple weeks there, we were pretty much just going, where's Mike? All right, that's where he is, you know.
Well, we were lining ourselves up. Ben and I had a trip. No idea where we are in the year at this point, but
we're in end of July.
It's kind of getting to the point that we were seeing the way that the bait was traveling from the east to the west, and if you lined yourself up,
cut off the bait.
Didn't really matter whether you were high on the edge.
This is just before we ended up going to the true ghetto hole south edge.
Right.
When I think that was a flip flop day. Me and you were on Line Shy. Brian and Greg were on Fortuna, and you guys were sitting on Fortuna where we had been
on the corner,
and we went just shoal of that.
Yeah.
And got one.
We were we're gonna leave late.
Yeah.
Remember we left late?
Oh yeah.
We're gonna leave late and pull up and go off because we just got crazy lucky.
That fish specifically, I remember, was one of the most stubborn fish. It was one of those bites where first off, we almost left because we're this looks good, but we had dogfish on everything, and we kept pulling up the down rod to not get dogfished, and our far and our mid were dogged, and we're okay, this might not work. And just as we were this might not work, a whale comes up right behind us, and we're let's give it 10 minutes. Let's give it 10 minutes. And so we put out a mid, and we had the down rod out.
Yeah, we need to put the down rod in the water.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we had a mid out, something like that. We only had 1 or 2 rods out. And sure enough, the mid floater gets sucked down, and it was one of those weird bites where you're I think we're on. I'm pretty sure you got on the rod. You're I think we're on. I think it's a tuna. Yeah, and it just was it never really got tight.
Those are short for the first 30 minutes. This is now 30 minutes.
Yeah,
not short.
we almost didn't get off the anchor, and then like you said, it didn't really pull. It was pretty close. I think the swivel came out of the water. It's still gray light, so you can't never could get a good verification of how big it was. And then it was just dogging us to the point where, like you said, it has to be a big one. but it ended up being a 97 incher. And remember the end game on that fish up on the high ground? And it was just like
choppy.
Yeah, it was getting rough. And we're like, oh
Taylor's
my God, we're
voice
going
on
to
the
lose
radio
this
was
thing.
hilarious. He's like, you could like hear how pissed he was. He's like,
We should have had him like 4 different times.
Yeah.
what the hell did he say?
Wasn't he doing it?
It was funny as shit.
Because you were lefty and we needed a righty to throw the harpoon, but I couldn't get off the wheel because of what he was doing with his circles.
So
we were like backing
on line shy. If they're
backing with
pinwheeling, counterclockwise, Brian kills him. If they're pinwheeling clockwise, I can kill him pretty. Oh
Yeah.
wait, is that right? Yeah, if they're pinwheeling clockwise,
yeah.
I can kill him pretty good. When they're pinwheeling counterclockwise, you really need the driver or the guy in the back needs to harpoon
as a
him.
righty because you're going to hit the line as a lefty.
Well, not only that, they're
it's
like
just-
coming at the bow, so you're constantly having to like jog.
That
your
was
bow
our
away from
problem.
the inside.
I had to constantly be on the wheel
Yeah.
because of the way the waves were going, the way the
Right.
fish was going. And twice, I think I almost threw at him.
Right.
And I'm like, I can't leave this wheel.
No, right.
Yeah.
And so it was close, and the fish was like almost submitting, and he wasn't. And
Right.
it just was one of those, he stayed at like 25, 30 feet where it was like torturous. Like you saw the swivel for like a half hour, and mind you, there was still, we were kind of close to the edge, but there was still a decent fleet of people like up on the high ground. So it was a minefield of boats that were kind of navigating through,
Right.
you know, at the same time. And we did end up getting it, but yeah, it was like for the size fish, usually like in the 90s, like are, you know, you can handle them pretty well as long as you know, aren't making egregious mistakes. But he did not want to give up.
Yeah.
No.
That was kind of the story of the year, that high 90-inch range.
Yeah,
Kinda
they were mean.
Then we had the Kendra Ace. They had a great couple days. We killed a 103. Then the next day was prefrontal. That's where the full frontal joke came from. We released two in the fall.
Okay, yeah, that
3
day-
bites, released 2 in the fall. Almost got
What
our
day was
fingers
this?
That day
cut
was
off.
cool. So the first fish of the day, we're going out, and we had these people the day before.
I'm on August 8th now. So we had the fish with
August 8th, we each killed one.
Yeah, August 8th, we each killed one. And then August 9th,
Yes.
and you guys still got paid.
We got to delete that name.
Yeah.
Now. You guys and your names.
Sorry.
Holy crap.
And then we went out right before the southeast wind started.
So, and it ended up being a good thing. But I remember that day we were looking at it. It was a release day. It was foggy. It was forecast to be pretty crappy. And we're like, the Boston bass bite had been pretty good. And we had already caught / killed a giant with this group. It was a 2-day trip. And so we were like, so we have a couple of thoughts for today. And we were kind of leaning towards thinking it was a better idea to go to Boston and bass fish because the Boston bass fishing was great. It was a heavy west wind that was supposed to pick up. We're like, we're going to get hammered.
It was
and
west
rough.
in the morning, switching to southeast 30. I remember that.
And so, and we kind of knew these people really like tuna fishing. Turns out they were like, let's just roll the dice and go tuna fishing. And it ended up being a great thing because we got out there and it wasn't calm, but it was just like smooth rollers.
Yeah.
And foggy.
Perfect tuna conditions.
As soon as we get there, the bait looked right and we hook up. And these people have been a couple of years. They fought a fish the day before. And I'm like, we're going to do the fervor method here, the hands-off parenting.
Yeah.
And so I'm just sitting back, letting them do their thing a little bit. Immediately, all the line gets piled up on one side on the initial run, and the fish takes a run, and you just hear. We're like, and then you hear. And the line is starting to loop underneath itself. It loops under, and you see the rock go. And we're like, oh no. So Brian kind of drives at the fish a little bit, and we're both there, and it had looped under. So I have my wiring gloves on. So I pull slack in the line and Brian's trying to, pick it out. And we're like, this is going to work. And we like it because it was working out fine. And Brian's starting to pick it. And then the fish started taking. I'm like, it's pretty tight. Move it, get out. And we pull our hands back. And just as we pull our hands back, the line goes and explodes. And a whole wrap of line breaks off from around like a 12-inch. It was like a weed whacker. Oh, like putting your hands in a weed whacker.
Ben and I both like went to
full blown Peter Griffin.
sliced me wide open.
Yeah.
Cut you open.
Cut me open.
Yeah.
Messed up. I forget what fingernail it was, but hit me right in the tip of the finger. And you know that fingertip smack?
Oh, the
right
old
in the
fingertip
nail?
smack.
Yeah.
It was like, it's a lame injury, but like it hurts way worse than like a massive gash for some reason. Whatever.
It's also just annoying because then you're like trying to crimp, trying to do things for the rest of the day, and you're basically one-handed.
You have like blood blisters on the tips of your fingers. So we're like, all right, maybe we gotta keep watching a little more.
Then we lost that one.
Yep.
We had a little safety briefing. Then we got back on. That rod was junk. Ben got a floater out. Immediately went off. Got that fish. Like 65 pounds of drag, 800 pounder. Then we got back. We had one rod left.
We do this genetic sampling, and we had taken a fin clip off of that fish, and we get back, and we already hooked two, fought one for a good while. It was like an hour and 20 fight, and so we're like sitting there, kind of like we did it,
Yeah.
and. Brian's getting out all his test tubes and stuff, and I'm like, I'll send one out. I get this one sent out, and literally, I don't get it 50 feet behind the boat. And I'm like, we're on. And Brian's like, what the? And so he turned around and he's still like, well, hold on. I got him. So we're just like, the fish is just screaming off. And Brian finished doing the logging of the sample. And the weather, it was starting to pick up a bit. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, let's just put it to full drag. So
right at the beginning of the full drag thing.
Yeah. This was the first full drag.
So the fish is running away while Brian was doing his thing. It was just at 45 pounds. And then literally we're like, let's just go to full drag. As soon as we turned the boat around, we went to full drag, and the fish just was like still digging, but it like slowed down, it's like it put it in highway gear. And, we slowed him right down. We reeled up to him, and I think
we got the release in 8 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah,
and then we got the actual release in like under 30. I want to say it was like 20 something minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, he came right in, and then we got him right to the side of the boat, release, and then he like dug down, and then he couldn't go anywhere. He ran up on the high ground, and with full drag, he just...
Pretty much from then on forward for release days, because so many of those fish were going shoal when we were hooking up, it was... if we had a release, even if we were going pretty heavy drag on our first fish, but if we got a second opportunity, it was full drag immediately.
Right.
I think that's going to be my new go-to for release fishing. Just if you get one like good and everything goes smooth and you get the pictures and stuff, it's like, all right, guys.
Right.
Maybe let him take his first run, but as soon as the first run's done, just full drag.
There.
Especially if they go
Not until you're up into the top shot, though.
Yeah, once you're back on the top shot, because you're just compromising your...
One other thing that was helping us, too, is we fished 180 at 80% of the time this year.
We did fish 180 a lot.
It could be like a placebo effect, but we had some days where I swear they were seeking it out. We would, you'd have 150 on your down rod and your far floater, and your mid floater has 180, and you had been getting bit on your down rod, and they bite the mid float with the 180.
Yeah.
And more so when we were going to mackerel, but like it might be something that more resistance in the water, slows down your mackerel a little bit, and a fast fish can't quite go quite as fast, and the tuna catches it. But obviously there's times on, bluebird calm days where you could totally see a disadvantage. But
Southwest corner though, how many days on Fortuna in whatever that was? Maybe August. It was like the tail end of the herring bite there.
Right.
Yeah.
We got a bunch in a row. All we were fishing was 180 on those like grease calm mirror days, and we were just getting down rod bite after down rod bite.
Yep.
We get 5 that day with Joe and his brother.
Yeah, that was. His
brother.
Those were all floater.
Now you're working up to that. So you had.
Sounds like that was Dad's favorite day. He keeps bringing it up. It was a fun day.
Kendra Ace, we talked about that one. That was foggy.
We do need to go back one little bit. This is back to the old BE bite. We had a severe weather window come through, and the bite was pretty good, and we decided to do a commercial day, right?
Oh, the real rough day?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And we got bit when it was mirror calm.
Yeah. So we go out.
Yeah, that was just before.
Just before this?
Kendra.
Okay, so it wasn't that far off.
Same week.
So we go out, and we go up to the old BE area.
Yeah.
And It was pretty nasty in the morning. It wasn't super nasty. The waves were really big, but they were like spaced enough.
Yeah, you could just go slow.
Yeah. And well, apparently we didn't go quite slow enough because one of them had no backside and we dropped off of a 2-story building.
The day is split the middle of my boat.
Yeah. And we broke OG's toy and we didn't know. But after that wave, I'm sure, I think we all talked about it after, but after that wave, we were all watching the bilge pump float switch. Yeah. It has a light on it, but it was like, it was a substantial enough of a drop.
The weirdest part was it was like a 2-hour steam because I was only going 10 knots.
Yeah.
And every wave was fine. It was soft.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there was one
no
back. And we were like, where the fuck did that thing come from?
It was like, it was big, but it was smooth. It wasn't choppy. And just that one, whatever, it was that 7th swell that like stacked with another swell. And it just, next thing you know, we're all just like airborne going down.
All right, let's go.
So whatever. In hindsight, separated one of the stringers a little bit, minor dip.
Oh, it was just the gel coat.
But so we get on anchor and we're sitting there. We're like, what the hell are we even doing out here? And, you see Cody out there and you're like, I guess we're not that crazy. Then like a 20-foot, cuddy cab. And you're like, okay, like we're pussies. But anyways, so we're sitting there and it was nasty. And it was, I've never seen a day where it went from being like 6 footers down to like mirror calm, from like 8 a.m. being 6+ foot down to flat glass calm.
No residual
swell or anything.
It was weird. It was like a whole different day.
And we were mind you, while it's rough, everyone around us is getting bit, and we're just like, and it was a cool bite because like all day long, like people were getting bit. It never looked great, but everyone's getting bit. So you're like, okay, this could happen at any moment. And it kept getting calmer and calmer, and the bites felt like they're getting further and further apart. And we're like, it got to be that like, I think it was 3:30 and it was grease calm, sunny. We're like, this doesn't feel like that fishy day anymore where people are just getting bit throughout the day. And, sure enough, we go off, grease calm.
That was a cool bite.
Yeah.
Looked at the dead mackerel and ate the floater.
Yeah.
Ben called it. And maybe I'll eat the world.
Oh, yeah, right. Right, yeah, it always happens. Brian's like, we're not even fishing right now. The boats, the balloons, your down rods here, your mid floaters 5 feet on the other side of the boat, your far floaters like ebbing with a massive belly like 50 feet away from the boat. Brian's like, we're not even fishing right now. I don't even know.
And we're on.
And then it's like, Taylor's like, we're marking on the down. And it like comes up and goes back down. And maybe it'll eat the, and it ate the mid floater.
Smoked it.
Yeah.
That was a great day. Then we got,
but yeah, so that was a little bit
what we talked about with Kendra Ace, foggy day.
Yep.
Then we had the most vicious tuna run I've ever seen in my life. The Monday after that, we were back drifting shoal.
Yep.
T and OG were sitting the tip. We went back to just south of OBE to get away from everyone. Remember, we just went north of the fleet and there were some birds trickling. Actually, Jack was coming down from the north. And he was like, I just saw some smashers. We're like, let's go try it.
Yep.
Did one drift. We got to like basically even with the high spot in the corner, but north of it, maybe a little bit east. And then we got bit. Fish acted normal. Dude, Taylor, I'm not kidding you. How fast were we going? 20 knots? 22 knots?
Yeah, I think we saw 24 knots on the dash. And we were on plane and 3-footers like going down sea.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like just slack line. Well, the backstory of it was the initial run, we were going like 15, 16, because he's like heading there was high flyers on the high ground and we're going around them.
Yeah.
And like he's heading for a high flyer. And so like you kind of got to make time to get up and around because he's stretched out. He's going to loop around that flyer and then you're porked. But so we're racing up to get around these flyers. We get around the first flyer going like a reasonable fast, chasing down the fish. And then we turn and we're going down sea and the fish is booking it, and we just kept going faster and faster, and we're going 25 knots. And Brian's like, "Are we gaining on him yet?" I'm like, "He's still taking." But so he must have done for like a mile and a half, at least a mile. The fish did a full speed sprint while towing us. And like the rod never came slack. He came because he was heading around the second high flyer, comes around the flyer, and the line was burning into the buoy of the flyer, and we just barely got it off as we were getting close.
It's the one you guys hooked it, like you said, the northeast of the high grounds, and then you killed it in the deep water, almost Beacon Hill.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember
that
you
run though.
You started dragging it back. I'm like, didn't you guys hook it like? Wasn't like 4.5 miles?
It wasn't even like we had a bow, like a water pressure, Yeah,
you're going straight at the.
It was straight at it. He was on the surface surfing full speed, 30 miles an hour, and we were matching his speed, and the reel still sounded.
Yeah, it was like
initial bite runs.
That was like 3.5 foot northwest chop that day. And so we after that initial run, he ran into the chop, turned around, and now we're running with the chop. And that fish, after those initial runs and getting up on the drag, like he burnt his energy, but he was a big, stubborn, heavy fish. And he was getting in the swells for almost an hour. We had the swivel out of the water and you could see the fish, but he wasn't close enough to harpoon. He kept coming up. He'd surf down the wave. We'd reel him back up, swivel on the rod, swivel off the rod. And it was like painful because you could see him, you could almost taste him. And like he would get the swell and he would come up and then he'd get in that next swell and they were just big enough and he'd push away. And like,
there was a lot of boat maneuvering at the end.
Yeah, like a lot of times I feel like in those fights where you get in stalemates, like you kind of have to do something risky / weird. Like you break their train of thought. Like they'll if they get in a pattern that's just like not, benefiting you or you're not getting any more gain, like you kind of have to try something different. If you're just like going ahead and like, it's safe, let's just keep doing this. Eventually you're going to have terminal tackle failure and lose them. But so we tried going around them one way to like kind of mess them up. And like that didn't work. And we tried coming around them the other way. And I think eventually we looped around him and got down sea on him enough to slow him down. Because what would happen is surfing those waves up high, you'd loop down sea on the fish and he'd surf right under you and you'd have to like bail out.
I ended up doing a turn. Like he was up sea of us. We were down sea. He would keep coming. And then what I actually ended up doing was when he went down, I came around him the other way and then got back down sea again.
Yeah, so you went behind
Would you get the line?
him and
I basically went, yeah, exactly. So he was up sea, I was down here. He kept trying to cut the bow off, and then he would like surf. We're like, oh, maybe we'll get a shot, and then he'd come down. And then the last time he went down, I just kept going ahead and spun around him again, and then got back down sea.
Right.
And I think that just got direct connection right to the
like he was belly wrapped.
It was like under his chin, and then finally rolled it back the other way.
Right.
That was chewing gum.
That's fine. That was a badass fight.
But yeah, like you don't talk about it a lot, but a lot of times too, I feel like you probably get, I don't know how many times it is, you get stuck in these points of like battle with the fish and like you're in this same mindset, like this has been working, but you're not really gaining. And like you change something up, whether it be you put more drag, you get a little bit more aggressive, like staying on top of the fish, or you change a tactic. If you've been doing like the same exact maneuver that's been safe, but you're at like a 50-foot stalemate, for 45 minutes and nothing's changing, almost every time, like if you go back in your mind, I feel like you're like, okay, let's try, either dead boating, it can be just do a different tactic. And like a lot of times that, if you've been fighting a fish for an hour and a half at 45 pounds of drag, he is tired. So like if you like change it up and he has to make an aggressive maneuver again, a lot of times that gets him to just submit 100%. Finally.
That's when you're walking the dog, that a lot of times you just turn away from the fish and put a little power to the boat and change the direction and stop him, and then he'll do something different.
Sometimes you have to lose line.
But when you were talking, Bri, about spinning around on the fish, that's like an old harpoon trick when they're coming up on fish and the fish take like a hard left.
Yeah, you turn away.
You turn right and come around again, and you'll usually come right back into them.
Yeah.
Where are we in the year now?
We're mid-August. We got a few other. We had the ghetto hole. The first like good ghetto hole day was actually with Nick Scott. You guys hung on the tip. Ben and I were doing shoal drifts because we had got that fish with Ted a couple days before, And then on one of our drifts, we came off the edge at that point, marked like 8.
Right.
And then there was Mike got bit on the shoal. So we're like, fuck. So we ran back there, basically back drifted him, didn't mark anything.
So to preface that too, like we kind of alluded to it, but not maybe clearly stated it. We've been fishing the high ground, and we had high ground or that, the regular southwest corner proper of recent years. And our fish have been coming off in the same area, like what we're calling the ghetto
while
hole,
fighting,
heading towards Peaked Hill. And we're like, all our fish are going there, so we started fishing there.
Yep. Then we got Nick Scott luck, got that 81 incher at the end of the day. Then that's when we both pivoted to that spot for a few days.
And it turned into Mac City. I mean,
into mackerel.
We were catching fish on herring, other than some days at the BE.
So once we got on the high ground, it went from herring to straight mackerel, and then we got to that ghetto hole spot, and we were still catching a handful of herring, and we're like, we got to try it because we had caught so many. And you would fish it on your down rod or mid float, and we all, I think, put in enough time with it, and they just stopped eating them. They
stopped eating down rods, period.
Right.
For
well, it was
2 or 3
weird, that
weeks.
little flat spot like where you're talking about southwest corner proper.
Yeah.
That little flat spot was the only place we were catching herring.
Right.
It was like maybe 50 yards around.
Yeah.
Right.
And then all of a sudden when they left there, we couldn't catch a herring out there.
Right.
I'm going to move us along a little bit.
Yeah.
So then we fished there quite a bit, got a bunch. That's
pretty much the whole
then we went
of
to
August.
then we pivoted to Peaked Hill at the end of August. We had the one day where each of us marked like 40.
Yeah.
And they would not touch anything. Then we got a couple pick bites. We had that short. Then we moved. We lost that fish. Taylor hooked up. Ted hooked up.
Yep.
Marked the piss out of them. But it was super inconsistent there. It was good for a day or two, or even like a morning, and then you go back the next morning, the life would be there, the fish wouldn't be there.
They were going to the ghetto hole. It was still the same pattern. They were heading towards, the bank. From Peaked Hill to southwest corner.
Yeah.
And we saw it a bunch of times so I guess this inevitably, we're kind of skipping Peaked Hill, but it was getting where they would be down the backside close. The whales would be down by the golf ball at first light. And I know we'd run all the way down there. We get on the whales and we're like, oh, there's like 8 whales and birds and stuff. And by the time you get your baits out, they're already, halfway up Peaked Hill. And so they've moved 5 miles. And then by 7, 8 a.m., they're already up at the bank. Yep. So there was this brief time in the morning, and then late in the afternoon, they'd be back down there. Because I want to say Brett was getting them later in the afternoon, and we were getting them in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we called him back.
Yeah.
Remember? And then we both set up a game plan with him in the morning. He started down the beach from us.
So I think that charter day is actually kind of a cool story. So it was a father and a couple of his sons, right?
Yes.
And calls Brian, and Brian, we'll call and confirm the trip and tweak game plans with the customer the day before. And the father was kind of he's like, can we just really, let's catch one, because, my son, my younger son likes fishing, but my older son, I just think this is my last chance that, I could get him into it. So if we could catch one, we really got to catch one. And we're like, all right, okay, boy. No pressure. We'll just save your son's possible future, save your hopes of your son liking fishing.
We'll keep your family together for you. Don't worry.
Yeah. So we're like, okay, great. No pressure. And it was a really cool day, but that's the day we were just talking about. We go down to, the golf ball and the sunrise and whales breaching and jumping. So that alone was worth the ride, but we set up and marked a couple right away.
Whiff bite on a Ronzi.
Yep. Yeah.
And then Taylor's like, I'm on. He's back at the bank. You and Taylor.
Yeah.
I'm on. Okay. No,
that was that
no
day.
Surprise.
Yeah. This
then
is
he's
the day
like,
you're talking about.
And then he's like, I'm on again. I'm like, didn't they just hook one?
Yeah, it was 15 minutes past. So
didn't they just hook one?
Like an 80
we're on again. I'm like, okay. And then I'm texting Brett. I'm like, just so you know.
Yeah.
And then we stopped marking, still seeing the life. And then they're like, we're on again. And I'm like,
yeah.
And then Brett starts going before we start going. And then we all kind of got there at the same time. And it was like wham, bam.
That was a confusing one too, because it was like we got bit right at the same time too, but we're like, shit, like they got, they've caught 3 already. And it's like
the funny part about that one too was it was Joe by himself.
Oh yeah.
And Steve bailed on him, which they usually go together.
Yeah.
And so we get out of we hooked 5, I think. And Joe reeled in 3 by himself.
We had at least 5 bites. I think we caught 3 or 4.
There were 2 days. There were 2 days like that. There was that day, and then there was the day with the upstate New York hunting guys. They fished 2 days. Remember?
Yeah, they had a good day.
And they wanted a short. They wanted because it was closed days when they were there. So then we ran because we were trying to get a short.
I know. So that's what I was just gonna say. So the whole reason we went all the way to Peaked Hill, it'd still been good on the corner, but
it was almost all giants.
But it was all giants. It was like maybe you could catch a short. But so we ran all the way down to the golf ball to try and catch a short, so these kids would have fun and not hate fishing for the rest of their life and disown their father. And so then they're up there catching giants. We're like, we better go bend the rod. It's getting to that 9 a.m. point. Like if you don't make moves quickly, like your day slips away. We get back to the corner, get set up immediately. What do we hook? A short on the corner when we had caught like 19 giants to 1 short. So it's like, I don't know. Some days it's just, meant to work out that way.
And then your guys were like busting.
Oh, yeah.
Ball.
Oh, yeah.
And you had your tell the gaff story.
Yeah. So we ended up pulling the hook on a short on I think it was a 3rd or 4th bite.
Right.
We had the thing right up, pulled the hook. I saw it. I'm like, shit, we already released giants and they wanted meat.
Right.
And then there was like the last bite of the day. You guys pulled in, whacked the short. We already had just giant after giant.
Right.
And we're like, what the fuck? And the very end of the day, we hook a fish. And I'm like, all right, this is a short. It's like bouncing. It's coming like right in. So looking at the bite footage, it was a minute.
Oh, yeah.
It was a minute and 35 seconds from the time the rod swung until I had a gaff in it.
Right.
And it's like a 68 incher, and I shouldn't have gaffed it. I should have just harpooned it because it was so green. But I wasn't ready. Like all of a sudden it was, I set the hook on the fish, and the guy starts reeling, and next thing I know, it's like right there, and I barely even have like a gaff on my hand, and the fish is staring at me next to the boat. So I'm like, well, and just kind of reached out and nabbed him like right pretty much on the top of the head. And the thing does like 2 psychopath pinwheels like under the corner on the second time around because of the wraps and the pressure on the line, breaks 180 on the leader, and then the gaff breaks in half. We have one of those
bamboo, very strong wood.
We got a gift from a customer, one of those. It's not the LT one; it's the other kind.
Marita.
So yeah, Marita. So one of our customers got us these like cool Marita gaffs, like as a gesture gift.
Well, yeah, they had done that tournament.
Yeah, they did tournament, and they gave us one, and so I got to gaff this thing. Wraps around, breaks us off. The gaff just explodes in my hand, like in between my hands where it hits the gunnel.
But it's bamboo, so it just shreds.
Yeah, it shreds, but it doesn't break in half. And next thing you know, I'm over the gunnel, and I have one hand on like the last 6 inches of this gaff, and this fish is pinwheeling and crazy.
And the line was broken.
The line was broken, and my hand is legitimately under the water on the side of the Fortuna with my feet almost off the gunnel. And dude, it was one of those things where you're like, 100% this fish is gone.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm letting go at some point after one of these circles. I'm gonna lose grip. And I don't know how it just like did a high pinwheel and someone got a gaff in it.
Right.
We
I
pulled
started yelling, grab sharp
anything, kill it.
Have a sharp object and stick it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. Somehow the fish came in the boat.
That reminded me of the one that
Crazy.
it wasn't really a free harpoon, but we were trolling, and we got a bite, and it took a little line, and then all of a sudden it went slack with the squid bar on it. And I'm like, oh, what the hell? It got off, and we're watching, and here comes the squid bar coming in right towards us, and all of a sudden I'm looking like there's something on it, and I'm thinking it might be a shark or something because it was just coming right towards the boat. And it gets up closer and closer, and then I realize it's a tuna. And the friggin' thing's like coming right to the boat. So I grabbed the harpoon and I stuck it, and it friggin' did the old friggin'
Shish
kebab, and things freaking jumping all over the place. You're hanging it on the freaking thing.
Hilarious.
That was freaking nightmare fish.
I think the funniest thing after that whole madness when we went back to Peaked Hill to the bank, 3-4 giants, short and a short. Then the next day we went back to Peaked Hill because the guys wanted some bass.
Yes.
And we were like, oh, we'll combo it.
Right.
And based on what Ben and I had seen the day before, and like they wanted eels.
Oh, yeah.
Like there was no question. Like the only sniff we had was on a Ronzi on the down rod.
/ before all of this, you guys were away.
Yeah,
and
and
me
you
and old
caught
Greg
one
go
on
down
one.
there. We go down, and I've been thinking, we were like, there's so many
Actually,
eels
at
here.
Ellen's wedding. That's right.
And we go down there.
Ellen's wedding.
Me and your dad, we catch one almost immediately on a mackerel on the down rod. While
On a stick mac, right?
On a stick mac, yeah. And while we're getting that set up, or whatever, I'm like, I've got to recrimp that rod. I already had Ron Z crimped on to one of the other ones, but it wasn't really meant for tuna fishing. The jig head that we had, it was more of like
This is just a
we
test.
crimped it onto our bottom rod.
Yeah, but
the hook
strength
itself,
was a bass.
it was like
Yeah.
a
Oh, yeah, it was a
This
bass.
is just a test. This
so,
is just a.
and it was like we were gonna put it out for a few minutes. And
Well, we
like,
had something going on,
yeah, because we had
we
just
lost like 3 lines or something.
Well, we caught the giant, and I think we put the far in the mid. Well, we caught a giant. We caught like a 90
On the
incher
down
on the
stick
down
rod.
rod. We got back set up on the drift, and we put our far and our mid out. And I'm like, well, let's just put this Ronzi out as a down. I'll get the.
Well,
I'll
I
get the
thought
other
we
rod
wrecked
reclipped.
every other rod. That's why we use it. We've got to get something in the water, and we were like,
No, well, our down rod was messed up, that was what happened. And then we put our other baits out, and we're like, we got to. I had been wanting to fish this anyway, so we put the down rod down with a Ron Z pretty haphazardly. At that, we were just like, we'll put it out here. Maybe
we were joking
should we
like,
put
well,
a
how
weight?
depth was that? Oh, it was about like that many. You know?
And so I think I had gone into the leader box, grabbed a new leader, and took out the crimping supplies to crimp up the down rod. And next thing you know, that rod doubles over. We're like, well, I guess they eat Ron Z's on the down rod, just dead sticking.
Well, it was weird too because we both watched the rubber band go, and then we kind of like looked at each other like, is this happening? And then all of a sudden it went, we're like, whoa.
Yeah, and so like we were fighting it, and
It was a short.
it was definitely a short.
No, it was definitely a short. We
Squeaker,
saw it,
maybe?
didn't we?
We saw it, but it wasn't massive. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I was keeping the drag kind of light, and we were like a little keyed up. We weren't really thinking about it, but I was like, it's not a real hook. It's not a tuna hook. But I think I had 20 pounds of drag on it, but it was just too much. But we had it pretty close. We got it up.
We were ready with the gas.
Yeah.
Like, and,
Yeah, we
and
were-
it just bent off.
We were close to get
I
it.
didn't know it
and-
wasn't a tuna hook either.
Yeah, I think one of the customers started pull cranking, and as soon as he started pull cranking, it just straightened the hook. But
The next day, we won. So you got what? The giant, then you hooked the one on the Ron Z.
yeah, you guys hear about this, and
We hear about this. we're
ordered every sort of Ron Z
I come
jig
back,
head.
I had
ordered
like
like
4 different options.
10 Ronzis,
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
Hoagie, harness jig, Ron Z's. We had like the
Yeah.
whole spectrum, and there was like a specific size that they wanted to go
Right.
after. The eels
Right.
weren't very big down there.
Right.
Then you guys had that day before. We had the crazy day back and forth with Peaked Hill. Taylor and I went for the combo trip. We stopped at the corner for bait. We caught 2 whiting that were this long. And we get underway to Peaked Hill.
6, 7 inches
7
long.
inches. And
They're tiny.
I look up at Taylor, I go, and I rigged this like perfect little stick whiting, like tiny. And I hold up to him, I go, this is the one. And we got there, we put our mackerel spread out, looker, took the down rod up, put the whiting on, put it down 90 feet, next fish on immediately. But it was just the exact, almost the same profile and very similar color to a sand eel.
They definitely just get keyed in on certain baits
Totally,
at certain
especially
times.
there and during that whole thing.
I wish I knew about stick baits when we were chunk baiting whiting
Oh, yeah.
and stuff.
I think they were a thing. It's just they weren't talked about, on television.
No, 'cause we're all rigging our dead baits like
I know, right?
we're all rigging our dead baits like like chum baits.
Yeah.
Yeah, chunks.
Yeah.
Head, tail off. Counter
the stick bait
counter
thing-
weighting.
I don't think probably the first time I even heard of it was maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah. I had heard stories right around then. It was popular when the guys were fishing
Chatham,
the
right?
bee buoy and Chatham and stick herring, and the herring were there on the bottom and all that. So Peaked Hill, now we're into September. We found ourselves back at the corner again, fishing shoal with mackerel.
Yep.
And they all died.
And they got massacred.
Yeah. I mean, it was the best fishing we had all
yeah,
year.
The
September
tournaments.
opener, yeah.
All
September.
year.
Yeah.
The last week of August was just absolutely amazing. And then
It was,
they all died in 3 days.
Yeah, so
The bay was good.
with the new restricted fishing days, we got an extra week in August. Normally, we close down the first or second week of August. This year, I think we got like
Almost to the end. It was almost like the last day.
But there was like a week and a half, I think, of closure before the September opener, and so like it was this year. I feel like there was it almost didn't matter if it was a commercial day or not. There was 20 boats out there.
Right.
On Southwest Corner, which is fishable, but it was like steady, consistent pressure. So I feel like the fishing there also was just steady, consistent. Like it never really, we didn't have a ton of like 4 or 5 fish days or 3 fish days. It was like we're getting bites most every day, but there wasn't those, okay, it's a closed day. It's been closed for a couple days, and you're having 3, 4,
Multiple bites.
for the both boats getting 5 bites and on a closed day. There wasn't a ton of that in August because there wasn't as long of a closed window.
Yeah.
But that
It was building.
That week and a half closure was enough to be like, okay, it's going to be pretty good. And our September opener was pretty sad, I think.
Yeah. Oh,
We did all right.
Well, yeah, the first
the first kill day, we blew a hydraulic line.
Yeah. And it was like pandemonium out there. Everyone and their brothers like, we're on. We've lost 2. We've lost 3. We caught 1. We got 1. And so there was probably 300 bites on the corner the first day.
It was ridiculous.
But so
100 boats and almost everybody had a bite.
Yeah.
Blew a hydraulic line.
Blew a hydraulic line. Came in, fixed it. Then we went back out in the afternoon.
Hooked the right one.
Hooked an absolute
We're in the
jambalaya.
tournament. Green Harbor.
That was one of like the craziest running fish I had all year.
It was.
Probably the top 5.
Yeah.
You get it?
No, we pulled the hook.
Like a ways into the fight too.
Yeah.
Over an hour into the fight.
I mean, this fish, we were going like 8-10 knots, chasing it forwards, and it was grease calm
That was Rick Amaroff.
That was the Midwest Whitetail.
Rick was with them though. He was their guest.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, we were chasing in forwards for like ever.
Right.
Dodging pot after pot after pot. And finally it never settled down, never even went down more than 10 feet. Just did this like crazy Ivan surface stuff. And he went down and then we pulled the hook.
Yep.
Yeah, there was one point on that fish where he
Connor
was
we had
black
on the
back
boat.
away, where it was like right at that point where you're like, your arms are reaching like I'm gonna throw, and then it was right at that. He's like back almost out of the water. He's breaking the surface, and then he powers away, and we're like, there might have been 2 of those in that like hour span that we were fighting it, and then
Speaking of, to go back like a week or 2, the dart shot with the Cummins guys in the afternoon.
That was savage.
It was my first time ever spining one. A big one.
Right.
And we had a black back down shot. It was so calm that it looked like a pushing fish that you're about to harpoon.
Like you're chasing down a marlin.
Dude, it was like
Love that. It was
awesome.
sickle tails. Guys did a great job keeping head pressure on. And it was like so calm that the water was throwing off the transom, and like the water, I remember the water like pushed halfway over his back, so I could see like finlets on this calm side of the wake and then like his head on the other side. And I just threw to where I thought the middle of his back was. And Taylor was still backing down, and the harpoon, like when I hit him, I was like, oh, I got him. And he stopped swimming, so the harpoon started coming back like this, and Taylor put it back in neutral and got momentum of the boat to slow down. Then he just comes up behind the transom going,
He just brain spiked the mackerel.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then we had that crazy fight, lost them. We ended up getting one on the little boat the next trip because we had a maintenance day to actually tidy up all the shit show from the
I feel like the Fortuna story is actually pretty cool. So we blow the hydraulic line in the morning.
Yeah.
And we don't have any more because we had actually had a hydraulic line blow like what, 3 weeks, 2 weeks before
prior,
that.
me and Mike did, yeah.
They had a different hydraulic line blow. Yeah. And so now we go back out, we're like, oh, the weak link's fixed, we're good. And sure enough, we blow a hydraulic line as soon as we're getting to the bank. Had no hydraulic fluid. We're putting squids.
We had some.
Maybe a quart or
a couple
quarts.
Enough.
And so we end up getting a bucket of fluid from Hard Merch and
Sweet
Bruce. Dreams. Yeah. And so we got enough to keep us full to get back. So we're like, not idling, but we're like slow, limping home. And as soon as we got enough service, we're messaging OG, and it's Labor Day.
Yeah, it was Labor Day.
So we're like, we were kind of hopeful as it first happened. We're like, we could probably get a line or just recrimp this end. And then we're like, nobody's going to be open. And Greg's like, I know a guy who can crimp up lines in a shop. He has a hose crimper in the garage or whatever. And so sure enough, we get back in and like NASCAR style, rip this hose out. Greg takes off with the hose, drops it off at the guy's shop. The guy makes up a new line. He comes back with hydraulic fluid and a hose like 20 minutes later. We throw the hose in, and all told, we were probably only down for like an hour and a half before we're turning around and coming back out. But that was pretty epic to like, it was like
hook one.
Yeah.
After
and
all that.
Yeah. And on Labor Day to even be able to find someone who can make up hydraulic lines.
I'm going to throw a shout out to Bob Steverman from Situate. Not really a guy that does a lot of work, but he does a lot of work for our commercial group around here. And I woke him up on Labor Day weekend. He got up and did it for me like really quick.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And
where else we got?
But yeah, so then you were going. Then
where are you at?
We got one.
So we got through the tourneys. It slowed down. All the fish died. We had a little bit of weather.
Being sarcastic with all the fish dying, but
the bait was going off. We don't really. Can't really speak to the Bay this year because we never fished it once, aside from like Stone Ledge and stuff.
I thought you guys went down there a couple times.
Never. We never went
just
down.
after some bass days.
We never truly committed a day to the Bay. We did.
Wasn't there one day you went out to Southwest Corner and then grabbed bait and went down in?
Yeah, we aborted.
That was later.
That was late.
That was October.
Right.
Right. Yeah. That was like one of the last trips on line shy.
But like, I mean, by the end of August, I'm going to say the corner was like an A- fishing.
Yeah.
And then after the first 3 days,
I would say this is worth talking about because we see it time and time again. So
every year, it's the same shit.
And it's not even just that. It's you have a new bite. A bite's been developing. You have a commercial day, and say you got 100 fish in a spot. You have one day where most guys get bit. The second day it becomes a pick, and the third day it's you're grasping at straws, and 1 or 2 guys, 3 guys get bit. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, when the fleet gets consolidated on one spot in particular, which this year was decent. We kind of stayed spread out most of the year, but like that September opener was the first time this year that everyone went to one spot, which like last year we had it on Middlebank and earlier in the season where Middlebank was doing really good and everyone converges on one spot. The fishery in any one spot just doesn't hold up to that, entire fleet commercial pressure for 3 days. It's one day, the day one when the whole fleet's there is usually a bloodbath. Day 2 is like
50% of the bite.
And then day 3, it's like you might as well just go to some random spot that is good because that spot's so beat up. Yeah. And if the fleet spreads out on that last day, you can probably grind them out at any one of the spots.
They catch on to the ambush.
They do.
Pretty quick.
Ralph has video, or Mike now, of him following schools in the plane, getting up to Southwest Corner. The school's in like a rounded football-y kind of shape. And all of a sudden, gets like half a mile from all the boats on Southwest Corner. And they go into a single file line and they go north, way up around the whole fleet. They completely avoid the fleet.
Yeah.
And he has like 3 or 4 videos like that where it's like obvious the fisher. And they'd even go single file and then find a wide space between boats and go through that spot.
Yeah, I feel like we see it too, even just in sitting. How many times do you see the north and the south boat get bit? Or there'll be like a hole and they all rush that hole, and they all, you'll see there's guys packed in that hole, but for whatever reason, they're taking that hole. But yeah, they'll either group up, split around, or they'll find a hole and try and run through it.
Or they'll hit the shallow guys or the deep guys. You know, there's a few guys.
Or they get to the
now it doesn't sound.
That sounds weird.
They'll avoid the pressure.
Guys, they're avoiding the whole pressure.
Yeah, but no,
I was in my hole, a little bit shallow. Yeah.
Yeah, OG always hits the hole hard.
So then it was slow, fish were pressured. Then we ended up sliding back to grandmother's house, and there really wasn't. It was like quick windows in the morning. You guys had a 90-incher. We were at the corner, marked them.
Just before September quota was going to close.
This is like the 12th, so that they got one. The last day, we went up there, immediately had a bite, pulled the hook, and then we were up there. And it was like a mixed bag. We had the Nick Scott day again, lucky Nick, where they got a short and a giant next to us. Then we got the short at the end of the day on the stick mac.
So like up there, it didn't look good. That was sort of the thing. Like we went up all summer. We've been either having like pelagic surface mackerel schools or amazing herring where it's marking like you look at it and there's no way of mistaking that tuna fish are around, to now coming up to Middlebank and like
it was hard to catch 6 baits.
Yeah, like there might have been some bait in the morning, but then it just like it was our ongoing joke all fall. It was like, oh, it looks like crap. There's nothing on the screen. It's a blue screen of death. Now the fish are coming. And it really was. It was like you'd be there and there'd be a little bit of bait in the morning, and then the bait all disappears and it kind of looked like crap. And then you would go off when there was nothing.
Believe it or not, that's a common that area thing.
It's a highway spot.
It was only like a few years ago where those big piles of bait were landing up there. Used to be, we'd go out and you'd see this little layer on the bottom. You'd get your dozen baits.
Yep.
And then it would stop. And then when the fish came around, you'd start getting these bowling balls.
Right.
And then you knew the fish were around. But other than that, it was like a one shot a day kind of thing.
So the big pivot here, though, was, the pressure at the beginning of September slowed down, started exploring Middlebank, didn't look all that great. And then on the Kevin Freimeyer double day, Kevin Day, if you want to take his last name out, the macs were humongous.
Right.
That's when we started catching like the biggest mac. The corner was still loaded with macs, but they were like medium larges.
That's really well. So we were, middle of Middlebank, and then you guys were getting set up on middle of middle, and then we started moving. We're like, let's go look around because the bait didn't look all that great. We moved to the north and we found this one tight little pod of bigger mackerel, and so we're like, let's set up here. And I don't know, maybe
we ended up just moving right up there.
Yeah. So we both ended up setting up right up there, and then we pretty much set up camp on the northern end of Middlebank for the next 2 weeks, I would say. Anyways,
it was. We each had a bite that first day with Kevin. We had 2 in the big thresher. They got one the end of the day.
Forgot about the thresher bite.
You and Joe O'Brien had a solo trip that was slow, but I think that was post moon. It was harvest moon. Leading up to that moon, it was got good again for like 3-4 days, and we pivoted back.
We did catch a thresher shark on a 50.
Bite.
Yeah, we missed the bite.
And we marked a lot.
And then we got into a big stretch of weather. The 19th, the 20th, the 21st, the 22nd,
Heavy
the 23rd, the 24th, the 25th. Albeit like I think Brett fished a few days because he was tucking inside and whatever, but we were weathered out. I went to PEI, and I was actually able to fish in PEI a couple more, like 1 or 2 more days than you guys were able to fish here because that wind continued, which was a sick trip. We could talk
pretty
about
much
Canada
ended up equal by the time you would go home too. I was surprised at that, but that was, you guys got one more big one because you had an extra release day that we had a buy day.
Correct.
Right.
It was my first time ever killing 2 in one day up there.
Yeah.
We went 1.5 miles out. We set up our drift. We missed one on the kite, hooked up on the floater, caught it, swam it for 90 minutes, bled it, put it on the boat. As we got to the top of our drift, same exact drift again, as we put the fish in the boat, got the fish in the cockpit, put our rods back out, hooked up again. We only did 2 drifts, 2 fish.
Did you have 2 tags?
Yeah. We got like a 90-incher and a 106, and they were 2 of the fattest fish I've ever seen in my life. Remember you looking at the tail cut because we take pictures of them, analyze them throughout the year, and when I showed him the tail cut, I was just like,
we're looking at it, and it's
that was the smaller one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
The bigger one was nice too, but the small one was stupid.
I don't know if I want to say that you pretend that they look a little bit different here. Like you're like, yeah, that one looks really good. They all look pretty close to the same. Some look like trash and you can see, but for the most part, they all look pretty close. You're like, that one looks good, I guess.
Yeah.
They all
minus that little part of its belly.
Yeah, but they all seem like pretty close to the same. When Brian took this picture, it was like, it looked like a fatty steak. Like it was like, there was no like, oh yeah, that looks like a
big fat lines in it.
Big
It was
fat
Wagyu.
line. It looked like Wagyu.
And it was on a red Exactix box, and it was the exact same color as the Exactix box, but the fat was just pouring out of it. It was
Now
awesome.
you know why we were getting crap money.
Yeah.
/ random tidbit of the year talking about fish handling and whatever. Midway through the season, so everyone, I don't know, we've always sort of iced the core of the fish where people are going to be eating. Mid-season, we were talking to this very smart guy down the dock, and he's like, oh yeah, I always ice the tail. And we're like, if you think about it, I don't know how most guys handle their fish, but I'm betting they do about the same. Fill the belly, put a blanket over it, maybe rice paper, and maybe lay some ice over the top of it if they have enough, maybe not. But nobody ever ices the tail cut where people are actually grading that fish from. So like midway through the season, one of the guys down the dock's like, oh yeah, I always ice the tail. I mean, he's like, think about it. That's where they're looking at the fish to gauge your money. So you might as well take care of the piece of the fish.
Firm up that part of the fish.
Firm up the part of the fish that it's being graded from. And I do feel like we did. I don't know if you can put it to just that one thing, but we played around with different fish handling and trying to take better care, not take better care, do regular, swim the fish, not swim
Drag them, yeah.
But whatever, we messed around with it, and we did seem to maybe get a touch better prices when we specifically from mid-season on were icing the tails down where they're actually grading the fish
It
from.
didn't change much though. The first half of the season it was $2 to $8, and second half was the same thing.
Yeah.
But
I will say the
had
few
some
that we
good
did,
ones.
they were
I
part of the few that did better.
I firmly believe the fish is what the fish is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not saying that swimming them's bad or anything like that, but I mean, even Brian, where they did a tournament and left the fish out on the deck
true.
all day with its guts in it and ended up getting like $17 a pound.
Yeah, few years ago, yeah.
So it's like, if it doesn't have fat, it doesn't have fat.
Yeah.
If it's got something like yaki or something and it's
Yaki. Is it yaki?
Yummy.
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 Yuki. Yaki.
yucky.
Yucky, gross tunas.
But, then the meat's different color. It's like brown, when it gets like really nasty.
It's gross. It's
Right.
like a dull orange.
So
Where we at year-wise?
So beginning of October, I'm back from PEI. You catch another one with Kaiser, obviously. We were off.
Yeah,
that's
we
a
won't
re-
go into that.
That's a really funny 3-day trip because some of the Kaiser guys came earlier.
Yeah.
Kaiser himself
Kenny
came
had
the
a
next
day
day.
before.
Yeah,
Right.
It was a really fun couple of days.
It was.
It was a fun couple of days with a lot of fish caught.
Yep.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Then the last day for line shy, you guys lost one on Fortuna. We went 2 for 2. And then we had a little spell of weather.
Like a month.
Yeah, weather.
Weather sucked in
Then we had
September and October.
Commercial day with Jason Stock.
Yep.
Got that fish. Started deer hunting a little bit. Weather. Then we had the Dave Good day. We caught one that day in the morning. It looked really good. Then it kind of died for the rest of the day.
Oh, that was a shitty weather day too.
one of the days was shitty. We canceled and we moved him to the Sunday.
It was the Dave Good day.
13th.
Yeah, even when you moved him, it was still kind of shit.
It was supposed to be
2 95-inch released.
I know I bailed on that one.
And then it was hunting. Because we had weather, so we hunted the 14th, 15th, 16th.
17th
full moon
fished.
was the 17th. It was slow.
Hey, bud.
Did we fish the 18th?
Nope.
Why? Come here.
And then our first day out after the weather was with Joe again,
on
and
TV?
we went 4 for 5 before 10 in the morning.
right.
And then that's really when
It opened back. It like
big
really
herd-
started.
The big
coming
herd
through.
was there.
It
Again.
had been that pick of sort of there was a little bit of bait. It was starting to think about, there was glimpses of it getting
Yeah.
good, but it was kind of a grind.
Yeah.
We were catching them, but it was a little bit like a bit of a grind. Like you were like, we'll see. And then it started building and building and building. And what was that coming up to the October opener?
20th was bananas.
Yeah,
Brian and
so-
I were
It was towards
borderline hand
towards
feeding
the
him.
tail end because we had a lot of weather that kept us off the water.
Okay, so
And then
but it was
Bob was the guys
Right.
were fishing northwest corner, getting them like before first light / at first light. Then Bob went to the middle bank. That's why we went to middle
Yeah.
bank. The next day it was on fire. That 48-hour period was nuts.
Right.
To wrap up the season. So the 20th we had that crazy release day with Joe.
Yep.
We got back to the dock at 1 o'clock.
Right. It felt like the opener because it had been so rough that you'd hardly been able to fish.
Yeah.
The
Right.
quota was hanging on for a while.
And we saw what we saw.
Right.
And we were like, we need to go back out. We need to get back out there.
in the dark.
Right.
In the dark. And then that's when we did the night trip with the three of us. Got out there middle of the night. And Taylor called the bite. He said, 3:15 in the morning?
Yeah.
That was our first official nighttime stow wagon fish, I think, for all.
Yeah.
That was
that was
so
cool.
much fun.
So
So much fun.
that trip was pretty funny. So like they were out fishing that day. They called me at like 4 o'clock or something. And they're like, hey, do you want to, go out tonight? And like, I don't know, whatever. I was out fishing. I was on my little boat and I was just actually doing a river cruise. I was all the way up the North River at the top of the North River, which is like 7 miles from where I had put the boat in a little river. And I was where we shad fish is where I was. And they're like, do you want to go fishing tonight or like leave to go fishing? I'm like, okay. So I put it in bunny and boogied out of the river and headed back down, brought the boat back to Bridgewater and then turned to Mern and came over here. And then we like headed our way out.
Yeah.
And, well, actually, I went down there because I'm like, there's no way by the time I get ready to go, it's going to be, I'm going to have time to sleep and then drive to the boat. So I'm like, I'll just go down, rig everything. And then, because you guys had that crazy release day.
Yeah.
So the tackle was in a bit.
We had all the top shots done, I think.
yeah.
I did. It was all ready to go.
Ben went
Yeah.
down and put all new leaders and shit on.
And I like closed my eyes and I remember Taylor walking down the dock and I'm like, hello. And you're like, I remember you're just like, did you sleep? And I was like, a bit. You're like, oh boy.
So funny.
But yeah, no,
It was a fun trip.
we got out there and it pretty much felt like a dream because we're like half asleep, slept for an hour, got up, now we're driving out. And I think you took a nap and then it was like there wasn't any bait biting. I go down below. I think I slept for like 2 hours. And then I get awake and you're like, we're kind of catching some bait. Taylor had like been slaying the whiting and I'm out on deck, start catching some whiting. We caught a couple mackerel. I think we had like 4 or 5 mackerel.
Right.
And
a million herring. Started catching a lot of herring, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And we're like herring useless. They mean nothing to us now this time of year.
Yeah.
So we finally got our good spread out. We're tweaking it with the balloon tactic.
Yeah.
And when you're fishing a down rod shallow under the boat, keeping it from your bait from hiding, will float the down rod out a little bit off the back. And whether that was the difference or not, it seemed like it
This
helped.
one, the dark bite, ate out of my hands.
Oh, was that what that
Yeah.
one?
The next one was the.
Yeah.
But we'll get back to that.
But anyway, yeah.
You're on track.
Right.
Yeah.
But so we we were finally set up. We kind of had some bait. We're like, okay. And it's like 3:00 in the morning, and no sooner than that, apparently at the same time, Willie had showed up at, 10 o'clock.
He was on at like 2:00 in the morning.
He had hooked up before, so we didn't even realize he was on. And like, he's on, we're on. And
Sandra lost one right after we got ours.
Yeah, but so the fish comes up, bites, starts running away, kind of lazily. Well, running right at Fortuna or
Sandra.
.com right off the bat. And it didn't really fight that hard. This was the first one where
it was the first typical night fish.
Yeah.
I've caught a couple, not here. But I remember you hooked that one in the dark. That was just an absolute ball buster.
Got like 3 now, pretty much in the dark.
It was also, that one was super rough. So, I mean, that could have been part of it. But this one, it was pretty calm, and the fish kind of ran away. It did like a couple 100-yard run where we had to go under Sandra's anchor line. And then we were off and fighting, and it kind of just like dug down, and it did the same thing that happened when I was on breakaway, and the fish like kind of just came up, and then we reeled them into the boat and stuck it, and we were like, oh,
we're done.
Oh, we got one. And
it felt good.
Oh, and then so we get back to the boat, we're dragging away.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were kind of, the way everything was swinging, we dropped some bait off for Sandro and Connor there. And we were kind of cucking them a little bit with how everything was swinging. So we're like, we'll just pull the ball with the fish out. And as we're pulling the ball away, Mike's coming in on Perfect Seas.
Yeah, Mike's like running parallel with me.
Yeah.
And I'm pulling the ball, and I thought like I had every light on him. Like, he has to see my anchor line. He has to see the fish dragging off the back. And I think I even said it. I'm like, I hope he doesn't turn into my anchor. And you guys were like, no, he sees it. Yeah. And then he must have just been looking at us
because he was kind of coming towards us, and then he turned hard and paralleled us. Like
hard.
we were like, oh, he sees it.
Like lined up to go directly in the middle of the
he does like a Z pattern coming towards us, turns as if he like sees it, and then he cuts straight at it, and we're like, we're like, maybe go. So Taylor starts gunning it kind of, and we're pulling the anchor fast. I think the anchor had just gotten into the ball, so we have our line pretty much stretched out 400 feet back.
Yeah.
And
bounced off his boat.
Yeah, He
actually hit it?
Oh, yeah.
It hit him.
Yeah.
But thankfully, right before the running gear, like it bounced off, like right where his keel starts to get deep.
Right in the solid part, yeah. And I got him on the radio. I'm like, I don't know if you saw it, but I think we just hit you with our anchor pulling it.
Check your bilges,
like, check your stuff. I'm like, who knows what just happened? Because it was one of those things where like he was starting to fish, and I'm like, he's gonna get
as his rig's out.
He's gonna get a rope in his prop / all 4 of his rods are smoked, or I'm gonna be able to scoot this anchor by him. And and it was like a split-second decision. I thought I had more spacing, and I thought I was just gonna be able to scoot it by him, and then come to find out, he like sped up to keep going onto the bank and basically drove right over the top of the ball.
Which was scarier, that or the friggin' ferry in the fog?
For me, I think the anchor thing was probably scarier.
It's always scarier when you're the one with the hands on the wheel.
Yeah, the anchor and the ferry in the fog was pretty bad. Almost getting smoked, and they had no lights on.
So close.
And they almost ran us over. Like within 50 yards of just absolutely demolishing the Fortuna.
Yeah.
So anyways,
we had that fish in the dark. Then we had a day off, killed a doe. Then Wednesday, there was 50 boats, no bites, too many boats. Then we went back there on Thursday because we figured people were going to be, out of the game because it was so slow, and it was also rougher Thursday.
Right.
Just the last day of the year.
It looked like shit. We were about to move. We're like, someone said there was life down OBE, and we knew that there were some bites like Circle of Death to like that area.
Yep.
We were about to pull.
And a whale showed up, right?
Whale showed up, marked the fish, middle float goes off, pulled the hook 20 minutes in.
Yeah, we were off and fighting and
on the swing too. So like we hooked up on the swing just as we were like, middle bottom of the step. Lost our fish, got back, and we were in like 160, 180. We were kind of all like disgruntled. It's just the 3 of us. Taylor's like, we can just hang here. And then you and I were like, fuck that. I'll haul the fucking anchor again.
Yeah, it was like...
It was at that point that it was choppy enough that I was like, we can try re-anchoring, but I'm like, there's a chance we don't grab.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was like wind with tide.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like starting to
Going
scream.
off the edge, too.
Going
so you
off
weren't
the edge.
grabbing.
And I'm like, if we got to reset now, I'm like, it's only like 3 to 4 footers, but it's going to be like, there's a chance we're going to try resetting and then reset again and reset again, finally get it to grab.
Then we got set up. We started marking again, had our normal spread out, tethered down line, and then going back to your point.
Oh, yeah,
kind of
that was
back to
the
like,
one.
I know we wanted to hit this a little bit before we wrapped it up, but fishing a lot of mackerel from mid-August all the way till now, all the way till October. Herring basically disappeared, fishing a lot of mackerel, fishing a lot of stick mackerel. And one thing that we had tricked a couple fish with throughout the season, because mackerel inherently, like, not all of them, but when they get spooked, chased, whatever, by a predator, be it a dogfish, a shark, a tuna, they either want to escape up or they want to escape down. And a lot of herring inherently want to escape down. They spend a lot of their time down the bottom. But mackerel can be midwater, all over the place. So what we had been doing to keep our mackerel from escaping under the boat, and
especially when you're fishing them a little bit on the shallow,
like
65 feet
65 feet shallower, where they can almost invert, the weight sitting proper, but the mac is truly up against the bottom of the boat. We started running the down rod on a small floater, like really small balloon, so you still didn't have a lot of bounce to the bait if you're in rough conditions. And then just putting it like 5 feet off the transom.
Just enough to keep them from being able to get up.
Just underneath. Enough, exactly. And this fish, our last fish of the year in particular, was like looker on the tether. Put the balloon on, put it out, and next fish bit.
Yeah, that was crazy because the bite hadn't been very good. And so we got that, we lost that one, and we were like, that was probably our shot for the day.
Yeah. And then marked 1 million.
Then we reset and we marked 1 million. Or we marked 1 million. While we're marking them a little deep, it kind of started to slow and we reset, like you said. Yeah. And then we kept marking them. We're like, oh my, this is going to happen again. And sure enough, it did. It got nasty though. But on that second fish, it wasn't that rough on the first fish. The second fish, it was pretty nasty. If I do remember.
We were at 50 to 75 feet for like 45 minutes with that fish. Right. And there really wasn't much we could do to maneuver to get him up because it was so rough. Like there's no way to spin up and around him or anything like that.
That was last fish of the year?
Yeah, we just kind of had to wait him out.
That one actually got $8, and probably because of the fact that there wasn't a lot on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was 20 boats, 15 boats to start, and most guys gave up and went home between it being slow.
And the 6 or 7 that stayed all got bit.
Did get bit in that.
Yeah, Paul got one, Hard Murph got one, we got one, Sandra
got one. He was the bite in the morning. Bob got one the day before in the morning. There was like 3 bites out of that one hole the day before when it was slow, and then the next day they came through in the afternoon hard. And all the while, guys were fishing inside too. There was a good amount of fish on the half beaks and all that life inside on the 900 line, which we weren't ruling out. That was kind of like our plan C.
Yeah, guys were getting them in short. Never got as crazy in short, at least for us. I think guys did do well in the bay for a couple weeks, the beginning of September, but we just never really spent any time down there this year.
Never really had the need. We feel like we had the bank pretty well dialed most of the year.
And getting the pogies for us is an ordeal.
Yeah.
If the pogies are easy to obtain, then I feel like we're more apt to try it in there. / if it gets, you start hearing that it's crazy. We've been giving it a try in September, but pogies were hard to come by. Never really tried that.
Yeah, all of our intel from the guys that were fishing down there, like, I loaded all my bait 2 days ago and got 60 in the pen. It's like, I hate going down there and being that guy that's like, can I borrow a pogie? Can I have a pogie? It's just like, you just never feel, you're worried too much about that you can't even fish. Right. Yeah. But overall...
Well, you don't leave with a plan of where you're going either. You go with a plan that where am I going to get my bait?
Yeah, You're just trying to get lines in at that point. But overall season, I thought it, I kind of thought it kind of felt like a typical tuna year. Yeah.
Even though they took a day away from us.
Yeah.
So if they gave us that other day, we probably would have done even better.
Yeah.
I feel it's consistent. I know that comparatively to other people, we got really lucky, but again, we fish every day, and not everybody gets a chance to do that. But
I think the weakest part of us was the first week of September.
Well, we also fish there every single day.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good year. Good clients. We had some great stories. We had some epic days. We had a lot of firsts.
We had some funny days. We had some grindy, tough
couple
days,
snake bit people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That come on too hot and heavy, and you just know you're not going to get bit.
Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve of this year was...
Did helical guys get one?
No.
No.
What was your biggest pet peeve?
But I have killed all my deer. I've done all my deer hunting in that helical camo hat.
Pretty lucky. Maybe it's a land hat, not a water hat.
It's not a water hat. But anyways, we never got dialed on the shorts at Peakit this year. For us, the short fishing, like this year, I don't think there was as big of a biomass of them. I know guys were doing well down there, but we never got super dialed on the shorts at Peakit. It wasn't like we were like, because like last year, not this year, but the year before, it was like, oh, it's a release day. We'll go to Peakit and troll one up in the morning and then change tactics, or go down there, live bait fish, it was like you could... It was going grocery shopping. You can go and catch a short. This year was like, sometimes they're mixed in, sometimes they're not. But they were sprinkled in throughout the year, but there was never, once it came to release days or just like release day charter fishing, it's nice where if you have a spot that's like, oh, do you guys want to, bring a fish home? Do you want to go try and release a giant? Like normally you can stay on the bank, release a giant, and maybe try Peakit, or maybe there's a spot on the bank where you've been catching them. There wasn't really that.
Wasn't consistent.
I know we missed a little run a couple weeks that it was slamming about 4 miles off the Beachcomber, east of the Beachcomber.
Yeah, down
and,
south.
I know Captain Jack there, he caught almost every day he went down there.
Yeah.
And then it stopped, so.
It's just hard to go buy so many fish.
You need a fast boat to fish there,
right.
too. It's like a 3-hour ride for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's...
Especially if you get wrong way in the current.
But yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like the last couple years we've been able to go right to the very, very, very beginning of Peakit Hill. You're practically in a bass fishing spot, throw some squid bars out and troll that front edge of Peakit Hill and, have pretty good consistent luck of catching a short. And it didn't feel like that as much this year.
Agreed.
We got a few doing that, but not crazy.
But it was a good year. It was a solid year. Some cool highlights. Probably my favorite, if we all go around and say one of the highlights, mine would probably be that tagged fish.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
That was cool.
Mine would be the day the guys forgot rule number 3.
What was yours?
The night fish was fun.
Yeah,
that one was.
I think honestly, one of the last day of the year was fun, just with the redemption part of that.
Yeah.
I think my favorite fish was actually that pretty choppy day, 2 or 3 commercial days prior to that. You were sleeping downstairs, and we went off and we fought that fish for like an hour and a half.
Right.
That was a fun day.
Yep.
I'm going to change. My favorite fish was the one we got almost $15 for.
I would say it was either the Ron Z fish on Peakit Hill.
That was fun that day, too.
Or, because we got... That day in general was great. Setting out, you got bit out of your hands, too. We
Yeah, that's true, too, yeah.
Got bit out of his hands. We immediately go off on a stick bait down rod. And then...
Immediately
go off on a Ron Z. Like every fish was like a cool, interesting bite. It wasn't just like, oh, we put out a mid floater and it ate a mid floater.
That was the day Brett left.
Yeah.
He said, I'm getting away from you guys, and he took off towards southwest corner.
Yeah. But yeah, the night bite and the Ron Z day, I think were probably my 2. Actually, though, going to bass fishing, my favorite day of bass fishing just happened. I got a little skiff recently, and I went to this random river, and it wasn't anything big. It wasn't anything crazy. And I was going out just expecting to do a little river cruise, and I'm way up the Taunton River, and there's bass blitzing on the surface, and I have largemouth bass rods, and I'm throwing a Zara spook, which is not an ocean bait, but doesn't have ocean hooks. I didn't even have a net, and I got like 10-pound test fluorocarbon, and I just start catching stripers willy-nilly. I'm like, what the heck? I go a little further out the river, and then the whole width of the river, like if you know where Battleship Cove is, you come up from Battleship Cove like 4 miles, and the river branches off and turns into like a small river. Right before it branches off, there's birds hitting the water and bass blowing up everywhere. 20 to, just borderline keeper size inch fish. And, I broke off my one spook that I had. I tie on a chatterbait because I had my bass tag. I was thinking of going up the Taunton River and fishing for largemouth bass. And so I had a chatterbait. So if you know what a chatterbait is, it's not a lure used for stripers. And I'm ripping it through these busting fish and catching them on,
freshwater gear.
It was awesome. And just not expected. And that's end of October, early November.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Those are
so you guys started fishing freshwater gear. Yeah. Those Abu Garcias with the
black and gold Rapalas.
I forget who made those rods, but
those like one size up from what Pritch has been using for trout. We used to use in the river a lot.
George is looking sleepy.
But no, I mean,
good season though.
It was a sick year.
Bass was solid. Tuna
B+
was solid.
A- overall.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think we'll just end it on that. How do we end these again?
We're gonna end this at 3 on OG's 3 words of wisdom.
3 words of wisdom. Remember, you can't catch them. You don't have a hook in the water. Always trust your instincts. And the last one, you'll have to keep listening. Stay tight, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in to the SeaBros Fishing Podcast. If you would like more information about today's guest, our episode, and show sponsors, or if you want to order hats and apparel, please visit our website at SeaBrosFishing.com. You can also stay up to date in all the latest SeaBros Fishing content and podcast episodes by following us on Instagram at SeaBros Fishing. Finally, to book a trip with us through our family-run charter fishing company, please visit MassBayGuides.com or see our latest updates and fishing reports by following Mass Bay Guides on Instagram and Facebook.